Suddenly, a strange scene occurred as the transparent liquid began to split into 6 thumb-sized silver beads that slowly swiveled in the air. Hanli let out a deep breath before suddenly biting the tip of his tongue and spitting a cloud of blood essence onto the beads. They cleanly absorbed the entirety of the blood essence, turned them into pure gold. His spirits were roused at the sight, and he spat out a streak of azure light. The light circled once around him before stopping, revealing itself to be a sparkling inch-long sword surrounded by azure mist. Hanli pointed to one of the purified beads of auric essence and had it cover the surface of the sword in a perfectly even layer. The small sword immediately began to flicker with a dazzling golden light. Hanli raised his brow at this and pointed at the ground several times, summoning several of the supplementary materials to fuse with the flying sword. He then beckoned to the flying sword, and it instantly flew into his palm where it became embroiled in azure nascent flames. Hanli slowly shut his eyes and used his spiritual sense to control the nascent flames and begin the tempering. This process would only be completed when the blood essence-infused auric essence merged completely with the flying sword. Day after day passed, and Hanli refined each of the bamboo cloudswarm swords without a single moment of rest. Were it not for the myriad-year spirit milk, Hanli's magic power wouldn't have been able to persist. As time drew closer to the black-robed man's appointed date, those who knew of the matter grew anxious, but the most worried of them all was Senior Marshal Brother Cheng. On the day before the deadline, someone delivered a jade slip to the Drifting Cloud sect using a flying sword. The jade slip detailed the precise location for the coming appointment. Not only was the terrain dangerous, but it was even somewhat far from the Dreamcloud Mountains. If Hanli did not leave seclusion soon, he may not have enough time to make it there. As the silver-haired old man restlessly walked in circles inside the official hall, Hanli silently appeared at the entrance. The old man saw that Hanli arrived and shouted with delight, "Junior Marshal Brother, you finally arrived. Have you finished tempering your magic treasures?" Appearing more confident than he was a month ago, Hanli sullenly responded, "I've managed to somehow finish refining the treasures. Senior Marshal Brother, I heard that another jade slip has been sent explaining the meeting place. Is that true?" "That's right. He wishes to meet you at the peak of Heaven Pillar Mountain. Here's the jade slip that he sent." Senior Marshal Brother Cheng nodded and handed over a green jade slip. Hanli took it and quickly read through it with his spiritual sense. With a snort, a stern expression appeared on his face as he said, "He wants me to come alone and bring the golden lightning bamboo magic treasure. It seems he's investigated me quite well. He even knew of my relationship with Wanner, or else he wouldn't have been able to use it against me. With his vast abilities, it should prove to be an easy task to stealthily look into the matters between Junior Marshal Brother Han and Little Sister Nangong. After all, low-grade cultivators are completely helpless against powerful Devil Dao cultivators. Junior Marshal Brother, I can't have you face this danger alone, so I've already contacted the Child Fire Dragon and 6 other fellow Taoists. When you take off, we'll follow closely behind you. As soon as that person appears, we'll surround him and we'll be certain to keep him trapped. We'll make sure he knows that he can't do as he wishes in our state of Zai." Senior Marshal Brother Cheng declared with a resentful tone. "Senior Marshal Brother's methods are quite good, but this man will most likely be on guard. However, it's fine if Senior Marshal Brother and his companions follow me. If he is careless and arrogant, it will spell his death." After a moment of thought, Hanli agreed. Help was exactly what he was looking for. "Good, it's settled. Although Heaven Pillar Mountain is extremely tall, it may as well be flat to cultivators like us. I will put a marker on your body and we will use that to follow you. If the opponent truly isn't someone you can fight, you only need to buy some time for me and my friends to arrive. I must thank Senior Marshal Brother for his troubles, and I will be sure to return the favor." As Hanli seldom accepted help from others, he spoke these words with complete sincerity. Senior Marshal Brother Cheng smiled and chuckled as he said, "Junior Marshal Brother Han is part of our Drifting Cloud sect, so we can't treat you as an outsider. The arranged time is soon to come. You must hurry with your preparations and leave tonight, or you might not have enough time to arrive at Heaven Pillar Mountain." Hanli nodded in agreement and quickly departed. Senior Marshal Brother Cheng sighed with relief after Hanli departed and wore a knowing smile. From Hanli's promise of paying back this favor, he knew that his efforts had not been in vain. Once he reached the end of his lifespan, he knew that his Junior Marshal Brother Han would do his best to repay the Drifting Cloud sect. Tension leaving the old man's heart, he He slapped his storage pouch after a moment more of thought and took out several talismans. He then flung them in the air before they flew out of the hall in streaks of red light. After doing this, the silver-haired old man sat in his chair with a pensive expression and pondered over what had just happened. These sound transmission talismans would soon summon his good friends who had been staying at the sect's guest hall over the past few days. 2 hours after Han Li departed, Senior Marshal Brother Cheng and them set off after him. In order to preserve his magic power, Han Li only flew in an ordinary streak of light, and while flew he fiddled with the 3-inch-long sword in his hand. It was one of the 36 swords that Han Li had infused with auric essence. For some unknown reason, the flying swords had turned gold after being infused with auric essence. If he guessed correctly, the change in appearance was only temporary. Once the auric essence had truly merged into the magic treasure, its original appearance would be restored. But when he saw that the 36 swords still retained their golden luster after fully refining them, he felt completely baffled. However, the effect the auric essence had on the swords appeared to be even greater than the legends had described. From his tests, the flying swords were at least 30% more powerful, and their sharpness far surpassed what they had before. Han Li was confident that if they clashed with any magic treasures that were made from inferior materials, his flying swords would likely cleave through them. However, there were some misgivings that accompanied his delight. He eventually recalled the main material of the flying swords, the golden lightning bamboo, and the refined crystal that he had used to first temper them. Could it be that, when these incredibly rare materials merged with the auric essence, they underwent some sort of unfathomable evolution? After some long thought, he found this to be the only explanation. Since this change was for the better, he wasn't willing to spend too much effort investigating the matter. Instead, he placed his mind on the aureate sword formation. Han Li didn't need to specifically cultivate it in order to use it. In fact, he had easily activated it while in seclusion to test its power. The sword formation's amazing power served to verify the words of the golden page. Although he was only able to form a simple version of the aureate formation, it already displayed a marvelous power that bolstered Han Li's confidence in facing the black-robed man. He needed to dispel Nangong Wan's soul seal curse. Butut, if he didn't possess the aureate formation, Han Li definitely wouldn't have obediently sent himself off to death. Of course, Han Li hadn't ever fought against a late-nascent soul-stage cultivator, and he couldn't truly know how well he would do. But he had fought against mid-nascent soul-stage cultivators, and reckoned he would have at least an 80% chance of trapping and killing one. With such power, he should have more than enough ability to contend against a late-nascent soul cultivator. However, it would prove rather troublesome to acquire the method of dissolving the soul seal curse from his opponent. Han Li will need to use his own discretion once he met the black-robed man and carefully navigate the situation. Han Li sighed, and the small sword in his hand disappeared from his sight. He then swept his surroundings with his spiritual sense, discovering no trace of his senior martial brother or his allies, but wasn't surprised. They were sure to be hiding in the distance from fear that the black-robed man would discover them, since their opponent was possibly a late-nascent soul cultivator. Heaven Pillar Mountain was an isolated, steep mountain tens of kilometers tall located to the west of the Dreamcloud Mountains. From a distance, it appeared extremely steep, with a third of the mountain reaching beyond the clouds. There were only a few short hills surrounding the mountain, allowing the surroundings to be clearly seen from the center of the mountain. This was also probably why the black-robed man had selected it. But when Han Li arrived 50 kilometers away from the mountain, he suddenly felt his spiritual sense roil. While his spiritual sense was at the level of a mid-nascent soul-stage cultivator, he didn't dare to let down his guard. Who didn't know whether or not the black-robed man was deliberately hiding something in order to lull him into a false sense of security. As a result, Han Li simply had his spiritual sense probe his surroundings while feigning ignorance about being watched as he flew towards the peak of the mountain. At nearly the same time, a black-robed man sitting on the peak opened his eyes and stared in the direction of Han Li. He muttered, "You've come. It seems the information I acquired was correct, and your relationship with that woman is quite deep. Putting yourself in danger over a woman, it seems I've overestimated you." The black-robed man muttered to himself and turned to look at the simple transportation formation next to him. When he sensed that Han Li was only a few tens of kilometers away, he stood up and walked towards the transportation formation in large strides. A moment later, he disappeared in a flash of white light. At that moment, Han Li felt the black-robed man suddenly disappear. Alarm ringing through his head, he thought, What use is there in using a concealment technique? Is he plotting against me? He then continued onward with complete vigilance. This is. When Han Li arrived at the top of Heaven Pillar Mountain and saw the eye-catching transportation formation placed there, his expression changed. His gaze then turned to the boulder at its side which had the words, "Do not be late," carved into it. When Han Li read these words, his expression grew unsightly and he cursed his enemy's cunning. Although he was able to see that it was a simple transportation formation that couldn't travel far away, if he took it, he would fall right into the enemy's trap. Even worse was that he couldn't know whether or not senior Marshal Brother Cheng's party would follow him. From what was carved in the stone, it was clear to see that the black-robed man wasn't willing to meet with him and give him the opportunity to negotiate. If Han Li delayed for too long, the black-robed man may decide to leave, and he couldn't afford to take that risk. If Han Li wanted to find the method to dissolve the Soul Seal curse, he could only take the risk of using the formation. Han Li's expression wavered for a time before he eventually came to a decision. He first swept the nearby area to see whether or not there were any devil cultivators hiding nearby. Then, he took out a sound transmission talisman and whispered into it before tossing it into the air, launching it through the sky in a streak of red light. Afterwards, Han Li took the spirit beast pouch from his waist and summoned its contents into the air. Black-tainted gold devouring beetles that just appeared then swarmed around him and transformed into a tricolored suit of armor covering his body. With a fling of his sleeve, he summoned a small blue shield in front of him, and in a flash of white light, an embroidered scarf appeared in his hand. Han Li lowered his head to look at the embroidered scarf, and a strange expression appeared in his eyes. The embroidered scarf was a protective treasure that Nangongwan had given him, and he stroked its smooth cloth as he silently stood there. A moment later, Han Li raised his hand and placed several protective barriers on his body before finally stepping into the transportation formation. He then took a deep breath and raised his hands, striking at the corner of the formation with a spell seal. White light flashed and Han Li disappeared without a trace. At the center of a nameless island in a small lake several thousand kilometers away from Heaven Pillar Mountain, Han Li appeared in a flash of white light. In the moment he arrived, he disregarded the discomfort from the teleportation and ordered his blue shield to enlarge and cover him, protecting a majority of his body. However, Han Li didn't detect any attack and had the time to glance around him instead. There is no need to worry. I wouldn't go so far as to launch a sneak attack against an early nascent soul cultivator like you, although I do hear that you are a rather extraordinary cultivator. A strange voice spoke from close to him. When Han Li heard this voice, his heart trembled. This wasn't the voice of the yin-sifting sect master. Could it be that this was another devil cultivator? Astonishment on his face, he turned to look in the direction of the voice. He saw a black-robed youth that looked to be in his 20s, standing 100 meters away with his hands behind his back, staring at Han Li. Although Han Li hadn't seen the true face of the yin-sifting sect master, this man's body and voice were completely different from what he had seen. Han Li looked at him, unable to see through his cultivation. With narrowed eyes and a wary heart, he snorted and mockingly said, "If you won't perform a sneak attack, then why did you need to place the soul seal curse on my Dao companion?" After saying these words, Han Li took in his surroundings. He was at the edge of a swamp with muddied waters and damp air. He could hear the sounds of a lake and see a short grove close to them. Han Li frowned for a moment before regaining a calm expression. He felt that there were strange spiritual chi fluctuations around him, and realized there were restrictions placed around them as he had expected. Although he reckoned they weren't formidable spell formations, they were certain to put him at a disadvantage considering that he was forced here. The youth chuckled and leisurely said, "I won't be needing to use them since fellow Taoist Han has obediently come. Although I possess some abilities, it isn't to the extent that I would be able to resist your entire sect." Han Li glared at the youth and asked, "You truly aren't the yin-sifting sect master?" "What, do I look like my sect master?" asked the black-robed youth with a chuckle. "No, but you were able to easily sneak into the drifting cloud sect and safely leave after injuring someone. I don't know who else aside from your sect master who could have done it. Also, I don't recall ever seeing you before. Did you not appear during the great battle?" Puzzled, Han Li spoke as if musing to himself. The youth smiled and wore an odd expression as he said, "Although I do wish to give fellow Taoist Han an explanation, I did not invite you here to explain myself. Did you bring the golden lightning bamboo magic treasure?" When Han Li heard this, he glared at the youth in silence. The youth sighed and confidently said, If fellow Taoist Han wishes to drag this on, I fear he will be disappointed. I specifically refined the transportation formation so that it will only work twice. After 2 uses, the other end of the transportation formation will destroy itself, and your friends wouldn't be able to get here in less than half a day. I believe that will be more than enough time to settle the matter between us. A cold glint appeared in Han Li's eyes, and he snorted, speaking with an emotionless tone. You wish to know whether or not I have the golden lightning bamboo treasure on hand, but how about telling me the method to dissolve the soul seal curse first? The method to dissolve the soul seal curse is inside this jade slip, but let me take a look at the golden lightning bamboo treasure first. I'm not like my sect master, and I only want the golden lightning bamboo. I have no intention of trying to avenge his dead Tao companion. The youth's smile disappeared, and he revealed a jet-black jade slip in his hand, then deeply stared at Han Li. With raised brows, Han Li firmly said, "Of course, although the golden lightning bamboo treasure is valuable, it isn't nearly as important as my own Tao companion." He placed his hands on his chest and then slowly drew them away. In a clap of thunder, golden lightning jumped out as a small azure arrow appeared in his hand. Holding it with 2 fingers, Han Li expressionlessly glanced at the youth. When the youth saw this, greed momentarily appeared on his face. Then after a moment of thought, he flicked his wrist and sent the black jade slip flying towards Han Li at an incredibly slow speed, as if it were being dragged through the air by a rope. Han Li immediately understood what he intended. Without speaking another word, he flung the small arrow over, making it travel through the air at a similar speed. Although the two were controlling each of the items, their gazes were fixed on each other's faces. By the time the 2 objects arrived in front of each other, Han Li and the youth both let out sighs of relief. The 2 took the exchanged items into their hands and quickly looked them over, only to find themselves wearing a bitter smile. "This is your golden lightning bamboo magic treasure." The black-robed youth coldly smiled and pinched the small azure arrow in his hand. In a silver-white fire, it turned into ash. I've also never heard that the simplest of the 5 elements techniques was capable of dissolving the soul seal curse. Han Li grasped the jade slip in his hand and burned it with blue flame, causing it to freeze and shatter into glistening light. The black-robed youth wore a stern expression, and he snorted as traces of fiendish chi began to emerge from his body. "It seems neither of us trusts the other. However, that doesn't matter. I will ask you one last time whether or not you are willing to exchange the golden lightning bamboo treasure. So long as you hand it over to me, I will give you the method to save your Tao companion and leave. Otherwise, I will just seize the treasure after killing you. Since it isn't an ancient treasure, you must be carrying it within your body." With a light sigh, Han Li icily said, "As it just so happens, my plans are similar to your own. Since you're the caster of the soul seal curse, the method to eliminate the curse must be within your mind. Once I kill you, I will perform a soul search on your primal soul and acquire what I want to know." "You will perform a soul search on me. You are the first person to dare say that to me for several hundreds of years. I will honor your audacity by leave your corpse intact." The black-robed youth smiled in fury before he raised his hands and shot several spell seals all around him. Then with a series of hums, 7 pillars of blinding white light shot into the air. At the same time, silver-white flood dragons emerged from each of the pillars of light, roaring towards the skies. "Not good, the 7 pillar dragons. Master must quickly leave." Before Han Li could clearly recognize the pillars, he heard Silvermoon's terrified voice in his ear. Although Han Li didn't know how powerful the 7 pillar dragons were, when he heard the terror in Silvermoon's voice, he steeled his heart and summoned 36 of his bamboo cloudswarm swords with a wave of his sleeve, having them flow around him like a school of fish. Knowing that his opponent was a powerful devil cultivator, Han Li had no intention of slowly probing his abilities. With the full force of his newly tempered flying swords, he planned to subdue his opponent in a single blow. As the 36 streaks of golden light revolved above Han Li's head, he struck the swarm of swords with several spell seals. This caused the golden lights to faintly tremble and immediately form over 100 identical copies of themselves. Just as Han Li thought to execute another spell seal and form the swords into the Oriate formation, the 7 pillars of light surrounding him rushed to attack him. The silver flood dragons inside the pillars looked at Han Li and opened their mouths, condensing sparkling silver balls of light. Without further thought, Han Li pointed to the blue shield in front of him, and in a flash of light it transformed into a barrier of blue ice that surrounded him. He then released the embroidered scarf with his other hand, and it transformed into a white mist of frost surrounding the ice barrier. At that same moment, A wild silhouette flew out of his sleeve and landed on the ground, revealing itself to be a beautiful woman. In Han Li's surprise, Silvermoon immediately raised her hand and released a streak of purple light, the purple cloud lace. With a tense expression, she made the cloud lace transform into a purple net of fire, forming the final layer of protection around them. Han Li's heart trembled as he had already placed down 2 layers of protection, and Silvermoon still didn't believe it to be enough. Just how powerful were the 7 pillar dragons? Just as these thoughts appeared in Han Li's mind, the 7 silver flood dragons silently released beams of nearly solid silver light. The beams of light immediately struck the net of purple flames. The net managed to endure for a short moment before 7 holes were melted through, and the 7 silver lights continued to strike the mist of frost formed from the embroidered scarf. The mist roiled as soon as it was struck, as if it wouldn't be able to endure for long. When Han Li saw this, his felt breath turned cold. As things were going, the 3 layers of protection were about to be destroyed in an instant. These beams of light were incredibly powerful. But just as these thoughts appeared in Han Li's mind, Silvermoon felt relieved and said, "So these turned out to be a counterfeit. I was worried over nothing." Silvermoon muttered to herself before forming an incantation gesture and spitting out a pearl the size of a thumb surrounded by a pink mist that carried a strong fragrance. Silvermoon then began to utter an incantation with a sweet voice and extended her finger towards the pearl. Bang! The pearl exploded and transformed into countless gleaming specks of dust that soon merged with the blue ice barrier. Han Li was somewhat surprised, but didn't intend to block her in the slightest. Once the ice barrier absorbed the fragments of the pearl, it flourished with light, and its exterior shined as if it were suddenly covered with countless identical mirrors. At that moment, the silver light pierced through the white mist and made its way towards the last layer of defense. Han Li grew nervous at the sight, but he continued to cast spell seals without interruption. At an unknown time, the golden lights revolving around his head had begun to disappear. The ice barrier released a blinding light as the 7 silver beams faintly trembled before being reflected, striking back at the 7 pillars of light at an even greater speed than before. Not only did this come as a surprise to Han Li, but the black-robed youth was caught completely unprepared as well. His attention was now focused on the beautiful woman at Han Li's side. When she had uttered the word counterfeit, a trace of astonishment appeared on his face. Then, in a series of explosions, the silver dragons within the pillars of light were submerged in silver light and disappeared without a trace. Han Li stared blankly and found it difficult to believe that such vicious treasures were so easily taken care of. Silvermoon pursed her lips, her face revealing a slight trace of satisfaction. She then pressed her hand against her chest and sighed with relief as spoke to Han Li. Not only were they counterfeit, but they were only half finished. They had truly given me a fright. The black-robed youth's expression grew stern upon seeing the 7 pillar dragons being destroyed. When he heard Silvermoon utter the words, "half finished," he said with a harsh tone, "Half finished? How could you know the method to destroy the 7 pillar dragons?" Although he knew that the treasure he had acquired wasn't the genuine article described in legends, he had still felt that its abilities were somewhat lacking. This lingering doubt caused him to feel as if there was a ring of truth to Silvermoon's words. Silvermoon's gaze flickered upon hearing him, but she had no intention of replying. Instead, she formed an incantation gesture with her hands and struck the ice barrier with a spell seal. Suddenly, light flashed from the barrier and a pink mist shot out from it, instantly condensing back into the pearl. Silvermoon then spat out a mist of light and swept the pearl back into her mouth. The black-robed youth's initial fury soon disappeared and was replaced with delight as he exclaimed, "Demon core, hee. So you were a demon fox, however your cultivation is only in the 7th grade. This is truly baffling. As it just so happens, there are many cultivators in the Jin Empire that wish for a demon fox concubine of their own. The price for a demon fox capable of transformation is incredibly high. It seems this trip wasn't a wasted effort after all." Silvermoon's expression changed, but soon her luminous eyes flickered. She then chuckled with her hand covering her mouth. "Although this servant does wish to leave with this immortal master, I already have a master. I'm afraid I cannot comply." Staring at Silvermoon with fierce greed, he casually said, "Your master. Soon that master will have his soul scattered. If you obediently follow me, I will spare your life. Otherwise, you are simply ignoring my good intentions. Following this senior will be much better than staying in this remote and desolate land." Still standing in place, Han Li derisively said, "Is your mind muddled? Her current master is doing quite well. If you wish to change my servant's mind, you should first pay attention to your surroundings." The black-robed youth glanced at the swordlights surrounding him and disdainfully said, "My surroundings? Are you talking about this rubbish swordlight? Although it is surprising that you managed to refine so many flying swords, don't you know that a magic treasure's might depends on how much one has tempered it? Refining so many flying swords was an incredibly foolish decision. As for those transformed swordlights, that is merely a flashy but worthless trick. What use is this ability in a fight against cultivators of similar rank? I can stand in place, and you swordlights still won't be able to injure me." When he heard this, Han Li wore a weird expression and killing intent burst from his eyes. "Your words are reasonable. However, I must first ask you if you are a late nascent soul stage cultivator. If you aren't, then you will die." At that moment, he completed a spell seal and activated the stealthily placed Aureate sword formation. When the black-robed youth heard Han Li, he felt a wave of unease and hastily flipped his hand, summoning a pitch-black hatchet. Talisman characters could be faintly seen on its surface, and a vivid ghost face was carved on its handle. At that moment, streaks of golden swordlight suddenly burst with radiance and released loud, clear rings as they streaked across the air, yet to attack. The black-robed youth hastily spread out his spiritual sense to find the swordlights, but he wasn't able to locate a single one of them. This caused his heart to drop. Without any further hesitation, he snorted and released the black hatchet. In a flash of black light, it grew to 20 meters in the blink of an eye, and its edge gleamed from its sharpness. In a blur, the huge hatchet fiercely chopped at the air, only for a golden light to suddenly blossom. An unremarkable golden thread suddenly appeared from underneath the huge hatchet and flashed before instantly fading away. With a bang, the huge hatchet was split down the middle and fell to the floor. "This is—" The black-robed youth's disdain suddenly disappeared, and his expression turned grave. He quickly raised his hand and summoned an emerald saber, which shot through the air before a similar scene occurred. The green streak flew about 30 meters before being shredded by several streaks of golden threads. Then, in a burst of green light, it fell to the ground in 7 pieces. "Zai, a sword formation." The black-robed youth recognized what this was due to his vast experience as his blood ran cold. This kind of sword formation required several tens, no, several hundreds of cultivators in order to employ it. However, Han Li alone was able to lay down such a fearsome sword formation, much to the black-robed youth's shock. Han Li saw he had recognized that this was a sword formation, but had no intention of giving the black-robed youth the opportunity to consider how to break it. Han Li promptly put his hands in an incantation gesture and contacted all of his swordlights with his spiritual sense, activating the entire Aureate sword formation. A strange scene suddenly developed near the black-robed youth as countless golden threads suddenly flickered around the youth, intermittently coming in and out of existence. These flickers appeared without a pattern and slowly closed in on him. When he saw this, the youth's expression turned pale, and he suddenly patted his storage pouch and took out 10 white pearls filled with veins of crimson. He then began to spin and toss the pearls all around him. Han Li's heart stirred at the sight of these pearls. They appeared to be the same as his own lightning beads. As the thought appeared in his head, he willed the Aureate sword formation to continue onward. The sword threads were one of the abilities of the Aureate formation, similar to the sword threads used by sword cultivators, but the formation was capable of summoning over 100 astonishing threads of sword chi. With the sword formation's might coupled with the auric essence-infused swords, these sword threads were far more formidable than those from common sword cultivators. Ordinary treasures were similarly incapable of blocking the sword's incisive strikes. As for items like the lightning bead, Han Li had no fear of them. So long as the true 36 swords were unharmed, the sword formation would easily reform itself even if the sword threads were scattered. The Aureate sword formation couldn't be set back by any attacks. Just as Han Li thought this, golden light flashed as the pearls contacted the sword formation, splitting the pearls into several pieces. Surprisingly, the pearls weren't explosives. Instead, they released a dense black-red mist of blood. The blood mist immediately dispersed and leaked through the air, spreading a pungent, sickly sweet scent. The bead was known as a blood mine, and it was said that they were refined from the most putrid materials found in the world. So long as one didn't have particular devil Dao treasures, the treasure's spiritual nature and power would greatly decrease upon entering the blood mist. Even if a powerful magic treasure with a highly spiritual nature were to enter it, they would take days of purification with nascent flames in order to recover from the damage. Of course, these blood mines were incredibly rare. Not only were the materials used to refine them seldom seen, but the odds of a successful refinement were minuscule. These tensum beads were something the black-robed youth had spent over 100 years accumulating. This youth was an elder from one of the 10 great devil sects of the Jin Empire. With his vast experience, he immediately thought to use the blood mines to corrupt the swords comprising Han Li's sword formation. Sword formation needed great coordination in order to display its might. If a few of the swords fell out of balance, the sword formation would collapse. Using blood mines was one of the most common methods used by Jin Empire devil cultivators to combat sword formations. And since the blood mines were incredibly rare items, the youth normally wouldn't use them in solo battles. He would only deploy them in large-scale conflicts, as sword formations usually couldn't be activated by lone cultivators. Although Han Li didn't know what this blood mist was, he immediately sensed something strange about it. Just as he pondered about it, faint rolls of thunder could be heard coming from within it as flashes of golden light appeared from the blood mist, followed by arcs of golden lightning. When the golden lightning struck the mist scattered in an explosion. In the blink of an eye, the divine devilbane lightning and the tensum pockets of blood mist had erupted in mutual destruction. Han Li was astonished by the sight, as this was the first time he had ever seen the divine devilbane lightning take action on its own. It had shot out of his flying swords without any orders. It appeared that the wicked nature of the blood mist had counteracted the divine devilbane lightning, a truly astonishing discovery indeed. And Li didn't know that the blood mines were specialized in dealing with the treasures of the righteous Tao. When met by the divine devilbane lightning, which specialized in subduing devil Tao techniques, the two just so happened to counteract one another. However, the quantity of the lightning contained in the 36 swords was vastly greater than the amount of blood mist. As a result, the blood mist was cleanly eliminated in the blink of an eye. The black-robed man's complexion paled and he shouted with fright, "Divine devilbane lightning! The flying swords were treasures crafted from golden lightning bamboo. Impossible! How did you acquire so much of it?" "I'll answer that after I send you to the underworld." Han Li took a deep breath and ordered the sword formation to continue since the blood mist had temporarily stopped the golden threads. The sword's threads then continued to close in on the black-robed youth without a sound. Although the Aureate sword formation was immensely powerful, it was difficult for Han Li to sustain with his current cultivation. It was a massive drain on his magic power, and he wasn't able to increase the speed at which the sword formation moved after activation. Otherwise, he would have had the sword threads close in on the black-robed youth in the blink of an eye and put an immediate end to him, preventing him from figuring out a way to resist. Han Li reckoned that the optimal time to cultivate the Aureate sword formation would be during mid-nascent soul stage. If he wasn't only using half of his flying swords, he simply wouldn't be able to activate the sword formation due to his level of cultivation, despite how his magic power exceeded that of ordinary early nascent soul cultivators. The black-robed youth surrounded himself in a layer of black chi and snorted. With an imposing tone, he said, "You truly believe a trifling sword formation can truly trap me? Your sword formation may be incisive, but can it cut my sect's protective treasure?" He glanced at the golden threads that were less than 30 meters away and silently raised his hand before striking at his chest. Black blood sprayed out of his mouth as a green, inch-long banner appeared from within the blood. As soon as the banner appeared, it flickered with green light and completely absorbed the black blood that surrounded it, turning it dark green. The black-robed youth gloomily waved at the banner, and it shot into his hands as a streak of black light. The green banner brightly glowed and immediately grew until it was a meter tall. The banner now glistened with green light as if it was densely covered in yin clouds, causing its surface to be concealed. However, one of the corners of the banner seemed to be missing, as if it were damaged. Han Li's pupils shrank at the sight of the banner, the ghost-sifting banner. Originally, the yin-sifting sect master had wanted to use their sect-protecting treasure to fight Devil Conquered. While it hadn't actually been used in battle, its name had stuck in Han Li's mind. Now that the black-robed youth took out the small banner, Han Li managed to guess what it was. The black-robed youth coldly smiled after hearing that Han Li recognized it. He said with absolute confidence, "Aren't you clever? This is one of the main banners of the 20 ghost-sifting banners. I'll have you experience its might." Soon after, the youth firmly grasped onto the banner and waved it towards one of the golden threads. With a gust, a dark green yin cloud flew out from the banner and surged, enveloping the body of the black-robed youth. The bone-chilling yin cloud expanded, and the sky was suddenly turned pitch black, as the cloud blotted out the sun from the sky. This incredible darkness had somehow spread from the green ghost mist with ghastly wails and screams echoing all around. With a mere shake of the banner, the entire world around them had changed. It was no wonder why he was so confident in this treasure. Despite Han Li's confidence in the Oriate sword formation, even he felt dumbfounded at the current situation. At that moment, the sound of tearing wind suddenly arrived from the flag, and several black threads shot out from the mist surrounding the youth, directly attacking Han Li. Golden light flashed as the sword formation's restrictions were activated. Countless golden threads chopped the black threads into pieces. However, the threads immediately turned into green mist and returned back to the main body. Before Han Li could react, the black-robed youth shouted in alarm from within the green mist. The yin ghost threads were said to be incredibly durable, but they were easily struck down in a single blow, much to his surprise. After a moment of thought, he decided to unleash the full power of the ghost banner. He suddenly tossed the green banner from the mist, and it bore into the earth a meter in front of him. Soon he began to utter a cryptic incantation, and a series of yin winds swept up the dense fog around him, sweeping towards the banner at its center. In the blink of an eye, the banner grew to 6 meters in height, and the mist that had been covering it scattered, revealing its true form. Its appearance vastly shocked Han Li. Han Li fiercely shouted, "How many souls did you use to refine that banner? How many people have you killed?" The green banner's surface was densely filled by innumerable faces. They all continuously squirmed from the flag as if they were alive and wore expressions of agony. The youth's sinister voice spoke from within the fog. "How many? Who knows? It should be around 100,000 or so. There are also at least several hundred cultivator souls in there, as they are required to refine a single main banner." Han Li grew silent and he coldly stared at the green mist. A moment later he said, "You are all damned." The youth sneered and said, "Damned. There are many that have said this to me before, but here I am, alive and well. And all the people who said this to me had their souls seized by the banner, becoming a part of it. You will be no exception." He then struck the banner with a red spell seal. Green light magnificently flashed, summoning a meter-wide hole in the flag. Black chi flowed out of it, releasing a series of yin winds and piercing whistles. Soon, huge skulls flew out in a line from the hole, their eyes glowing with ghastly green flames and trailing green smoke. The biggest of the skull had huge bull horns emerging from it, but the rest of its features appeared entirely human. Han Li was alarmed. Could it be that the skulls were from metamorphosis stage demon beasts? But for the time being, he placed the thought at the back of his head. Once the first wave of skulls emerged from the flag, various flaming ghost skulls followed. In the blink of an eye, over 100 ghost skulls surrounded the black-robed youth. Pointing at Han Li from within the mist, the youth shouted, "Go!" These eerie white skulls screamed before launching green flame wisps from their mouths towards Han Li. Of course, when the flame wisps traveled too far, golden threads suddenly appeared and flashed towards them. But something different happened this time. The golden threads sliced the skulls apart, but in a flash of green light, they restored themselves as if they hadn't suffered any damage. Additionally, they weren't impeded by the sword threads at all and continued their approach. Han Li was stunned when he saw this, but he soon realized that the ghost skulls had no physical body. They were refined yin ghosts. Although his sword threads may be fierce, they couldn't cut through something intangible. However, Han Li was hardly flustered. As the ghost skulls approached him, he willed a net of golden lightning to appear in the air and intercept them. Since they were ghosts, he decided to activate the divine Devilbane lightning. To Han Li's surprise, the ghost skulls revealed fear upon seeing the golden net and came to a stop. But after the horned ghost skull shrieked, all of the skulls opened their mouths and shot green flame wisps towards the golden net. In a roar of thunder, the lightning net flashed and exterminated the flame wisps, but the net's advance was stopped, restrained by their unending barrage. Han Li frowned and revealed an expression of surprise. If they were common flame wisps, they would have immediately turned to smoke after touching the divine Devilbane lightning. But these flame wisps were able to forcefully restrain the lightning, much to his alarm. The Ghost-Sifting Banner's title as the Yin-Sifting Sect's protective treasure was well-deserved. When the black-robed youth saw that the ghost skulls were able to block the divine Devilbane lightning, he couldn't help but smile in relief. While he appeared confident, he was actually filled with dread. If the flag wasn't damaged, he wouldn't be worried about the devil skulls being able to resist the divine Devilbane lightning. But without the opportunity to repair it after it was damaged, he had been worried about it being able to resist the divine Devilbane lightning. Since his worries had been addressed, the youth wickedly grinned and continuously sent spell seals into the banner. The meter-wide gap in the banner quickly swelled to the size of 3 meters, resulting in even more ghost skulls emerging. With ghost mist spreading through the air, loud ghost shrieks and wails accompanied the skulls. With the previous skulls resisting the golden net, the latter wave of skulls flew past the sword formation and charged straight towards Han Li. When Han Li saw this, he calmly slapped his storage pouch and summoned a streak of black light that circled once in the air before falling to the ground. The light disappeared to reveal a small jet-black ape, the weeping soul beast. The ape appeared as if it had just woken up and its eyes were half closed. When it sniffed at the air, it suddenly opened its eyes and looked at the ghost skulls not far away, howling with excitement. When the approaching ghost skulls saw the weeping soul beast, they were shaken and immediately began to spiral in place, unwilling to continue their charge forward. At that moment, the howls they had been releasing were abruptly cut off as if in a display of fear. When the black-robed youth saw this, his heart thumped as the sword formation was drawing ever closer to him. In his desperation, he shot gray light from his mouth towards his palm and lightly spun around his hand before severing his fingers in a bloody display. As the fingers fell from his hand, they exploded into clouds of blood mist and quickly drifted towards the horned ghost skull. A sinister light twinkled from the ghost skull's eyes, and it opened its mouth to inhale the blood mist. The flames surrounding the skull suddenly rampaged around it, coercing the other skulls to launch a wave of green flame wisps towards the weeping soul beast. When the weeping soul beast saw this, it hammered its chest as black light wrapped around its body. In the blink of an eye, it grew 10 meters tall. It then snorted, releasing a yellow mist of light from its nose that swept away the ghostly flame wisps and directly approached the group of ghost skulls. As the yellow mist of light swept past them, the group of ghost skulls were sucked in without any resistance. When the remaining ghost skulls saw this, they scattered in terror, and even the horned ghost skull's rage wasn't able to stop them. At that moment, the yellow mist of light spread around the fleeing ghost skulls and trapped them. When the horned ghost skull saw this, it condensed a brilliant mass of green light around its skull and grew a body the size of 2 meters, turning into a full-fledged devil ghost with hair draped around its face and curved horns. As soon as the ghost appeared, it immediately spread out its hands and launched a barrage of black fireballs towards the yellow light mist in a wave of explosive booms. As soon as the fireballs entered the yellow mist, they completely disappeared and not a sound was produced from the impact. When the devil ghost saw this, it wore an expression of terror and turned around to flee, but it was already too late. The yellow mist closed in on it and instantly absorbed it inside, leaving nothing behind. The yellow mist then quickly returned into the weeping soul beast's mouth before it spouted out another mist from its nose, sweeping the air clean of any remaining skulls. When the black-robed youth saw this, he wore an expression of fright and rage. Although he had heard that Han Li's ape beast had absorbed the undead chi from the copper-armored corpses and destroyed a majority of them, he hadn't taken it to heart. He absolutely didn't think that the spirit beast would be able to devour the yin essence devil skulls created from the yin sifting banner. Even the leading devil skull had been absorbed without being able to put up any resistance, leaving him feeling terror and helplessness. If he knew that Han Li's spirit beast had the ability to devour devils and ghosts, he definitely wouldn't have accepted the task of meeting him alone. The other elders of the sect knew of the spirit beast's abilities and had grown fearful. Its abilities were as much of a threat to them as the golden lightning bamboo. As these thoughts surged through the youth's mind, he felt a wave of regret. By then the golden threads were less than 10 meters away from him. With his death slowly drawing closer, he couldn't remain calm and hastily slapped his storage pouch. 8 treasures instantly shot out all around him in balls of various colored light. When they reached the edge of the sword formation, countless golden threads flashed by and shredded the treasures into scrap. The youth paled at the sight of this, and with panic filling his mind, he waved his hand to the ghost-sifting banner. With the flag back in his hand, he gritted his teeth and began to revolve around the banner with both his hands on it. He turned into one with the banner and transformed into a cloud of eerie green mist before shooting towards the sky. As of current, he could only hope that the might of his sect protecting treasure would be able to withstand the attacks from the sword formation and allow him to escape. Otherwise, he could only sit and wait to die. When Han Li saw this, he knew that the youth had exhausted his options and was driven to desperation. As a result, he opened his mouth and shot a ball of golden lightning. As soon as the golden lightning left his mouth, it ruptured, forming a huge golden net several tens of meters wide. At that moment, the mist-formed black-robed youth had reached the edge of the sword formation. Over 100 golden threads waved around him, with each flash shredding away a fraction of the yin mist protecting him. In the blink of an eye, a majority of the mist had already been dispersed. The yin mist scattered in an attempt to escape, but there were too many golden threads blocking him path with no chance of escape. Every gap was immediately blocked with tens of golden threads, pushing the mist back and trapping him inside. With only a thin layer of the yin mist remaining, the youth's voice hoarsely shouted in rage, "You actually want to kill me? Don't you want the method to dissolve the soul seal curse?" Han Li calmly responded, "Don't worry, I will just extract the information from your primal soul." "You want to use a soul search technique? You don't?" "Ah," the youth shouted in terror, but the last layer of the yin mist protecting him was shredded away, cutting him off. In a blood-curdling scream, his body was dismembered into a myriad of pieces. Only a ball of green light remained, his nascent soul. It took this chance to try and escape, but a net of divine devilbane lightning had already been set up outside. Han Li pointed to the net and uttered, "Restrain," immediately closing the net around the youth's nascent soul. As soon as the nascent soul encountered the net, lightning flickered followed by screams of pain. The nascent soul suddenly shrieked with resentment, "If you wish to use a soul search technique on me, I will detonate my nascent soul. I won't let you have your way." "Detonate your nascent soul?" Han Li frowned and immediately stopped the net from closing in. The nascent soul rejoiced upon seeing this and immediately shrieked, "So long as you let my nascent soul go free, I will tell you the method to dissolve the curse and save your Tao companion. Otherwise, you will have no way of finding out." Silent, Han Li's gaze flickered as he considered the conditions. At that moment, a light suddenly appeared around the nascent soul as a purple net wrapped around it and immediately tightened. At that moment, Silvermoon silently appeared behind it in a flash of white light. She quickly spat a fragrant pink mist from her mouth and launched streaks of silver from her fingers. The nascent soul grew dizzy as the fragrant pink mist gathered around it, and its mind weakened. When the silver light struck it in quick succession, its body was frozen and completely disabled, rendering it incapable of detonating itself. The nascent soul's face paled, and stared at the white-clothed woman next to Han Li in disbelief. "Not bad, your actions have resolved the situation cleanly." Although he was the one who had ordered Silvermoon to attack, he praised her nonetheless. Silvermoon smiled and said, "It was all because Master told me to attack at an opportune time. This person only wished to escape and was careless, allowing me to replace myself with an illusion and escape his notice." Afterwards, she waved to her illusion and it dissolved into a ball of white light. Han Li said nothing further and smiled. He had the giant net of golden lightning transform into a golden ball that flew into his hand and disappeared without a trace. As for the Oriate sword formation, Han Li had already dissolved it and had the 36 swords shrink before flying back into his sleeve. Han Li took this opportunity and calmly looked at the black-robed youth's nascent soul. It tried to curse as loudly as it could, but it lacked the strength to even open its mouth. Han Li's expression sank and he sullenly said, "Silvermoon, bring him to the edge of the forest and search him for the method to dissolve the soul seal curse." After speaking, he took to the skies and flew towards the other side of the forest. Silvermoon respectfully answered, "Yes, master." Grabbing onto the nascent soul, she followed after him. A pink fragrant mist soon scattered across the forest after they left. About 100 kilometers away from the island where Han Li battled with the black-robed youth, 6 streaks of light were making their way towards the island. The one that headed the party was a silver-haired old man, Elder Cheng of the Drifting Cloud sect. A red-nosed fat old man following after him asked, "Fellow Taoist Cheng, did you sense correctly? The transportation formation was rather simple. It seems somewhat out of the ordinary for it be able to transport someone so far." "I can't be wrong. I sensed it clearly, and Junior Marshal Brother Han should be close to here. Be careful, everyone. He should be a devil cultivator at mid-nascent soul stage at the very least. Although we greatly outnumber him, we must be careful with regards to our weaker cultivation." At the side, the child fire dragon smiled and said, "Don't worry. Brother Long has brought along the divine bewildering bell. Even if we are no match, we shouldn't have a problem escaping." Senior Marshal Brother Cheng glanced at the gray-robed old man and gratefully said, "That's true. If it weren't for Brother Long bringing along such a precious treasure to assist us, I wouldn't have dared to bring you all to brave this danger. After all, if the devil cultivator is truly the yin-sifting sect master, we would find ourselves in dire straits." The gray-clothed old man smiled and politely said, "It was nothing. In the past, Brother Cheng had done me a great kindness. It is only fair that I exert myself to help. Furthermore, this yin-sifting sect cultivator must hold us in little esteem to dare to injure someone so deep within our state of Zai. Naturally, we must show him that the cultivators of the state of Zai are not to be trifled with. Amongst the group, a large man with a dignified appearance smiled and said, "However, I am rather curious about your sect's fellow Taoist Han. I've heard your junior martial brother made a magnificent display of power in the war against the Mulan, even to the point of turning the tide of the war. I hold him in very high regards and wish to become his friend." The red-nosed old man chuckled and agreed, "That's right. I've also heard about fellow Taoist Han's thunderous reputation lately. I also wish to make his acquaintance." "That will be easy. Once we help junior martial brother Han resolve this matter, I will introduce you all. However, I am worried about junior martial brother Han's safety. That devil cultivator is truly cunning, using that transportation formation to rid him of us. Perhaps something has happened to him during this time while he fought against him alone. Don't worry. Since he schemed to have Han Li alone, his cultivation can't be too high or else he wouldn't resort to such tricks in the first place. With fellow Taoist Han's cultivation, there shouldn't be too great a difference." "I hope fellow Taoist Jai is correct." Senior martial brother Cheng bitterly smiled. From what he saw on the day that Nangongwan was attacked, he clearly understood that if the devil cultivator wasn't at late nascent soul stage, he was at the peak of mid-nascent soul stage at the very least. He wouldn't be easy to deal with. Senior martial brother Cheng didn't wish for such a powerful, newly joined elder of the Drifting Cloud sect to immediately suffer from something like this. Fortunately, he was able to sense a trace of Han Li's existence and was able to calm himself down, knowing that Han Li was still alive. As the 6 nascent soul cultivators chatted, they slowly drew closer to the small island where Han Li had battled the black-clothed youth, and their expressions grew more solemn. Senior martial brother Cheng yelped, and the party came to a sudden stop. "Brother Cheng, what's the matter?" "Junior martial brother Han seems to be flying towards us. I'm not sure whether the matter was already resolved, or—" Senior martial brother Cheng didn't speak any further, but the others naturally knew what he meant. It was possible that he had been captured alive or was running away. The gray-robed old man calmly said, "Let's make our preparations. If something truly happened to fellow Taoist Han, we'll be able to rescue him." Soon after, he slapped the storage pouch, taking a small yellow bell in his hand while silently watching his front as he held it. When the others saw this, they all took out their own treasures in preparation for a battle. Senior martial brother Cheng's expression grew sullen, slight fear betrayed from his face. A short moment later, they saw an azure light flying towards them. "It's junior martial brother Han. Nothing happened to him." When senior martial brother Cheng saw the azure light, he sighed with relief and smiled. The other cultivators were astonished to see this. Since Han Li was safe, could it be that the matter with the devil cultivator had been handled? As the other cultivators pondered over this, the azure light quickly arrived before them to reveal Han Li. Han Li frowned when he first appeared as if he were worried, but when he saw these cultivators, he forced a smile and saluted them. "Senior martial brother Cheng, fellow Taoist fire dragon, you're here. These fellow Taoists must have also come to help me. I can't thank you enough for troubling yourselves over me." After closely examining Han Li, the gray-clothed old man surnamed Long humbly said, "Fellow Taoist must be joking. We were too late and there is nothing to help you with. We're rather embarrassed." As if headed by the gray-robed old man, they all glanced at Han Li with forced smiles. When senior martial brother Cheng saw that there was no one pursuing Han Li, he couldn't help but ask, "Junior martial brother Han, what happened with the devil cultivator? Did you escape from him?" Han Li indifferently replied, "I've already killed him and disposed of his nascent soul. However, he wasn't the yin-sifting sect master, merely one of its elders." Senior martial brother Cheng asked with a tone of disbelief, "What? You've already killed him? Although he wasn't a late nascent soul cultivator, he should have been at the mid-nascent soul stage at the very least. You really managed to kill him?" When Old Man Long and the others heard this, they revealed astonishment. Since the devil cultivator was able to injure an early nascent soul cultivator in the Drifting Cloud sect and easily escape, they naturally knew that he was a formidable character. If Old Man Long hadn't brought the divine bewildering bell, the others might not have been brave enough to come. Now that they heard that Han Li was able to destroy even the devil cultivator's nascent soul, they were greatly surprised. "It was only a matter of luck. I just happened to be able to subdue his techniques." Li casually spoke and pondered for a moment before tossing a black object towards Senior Marshal Brother Cheng. The old man caught the item and examined it with a grim expression. There was a dense layer of talisman characters on the medallion, and the character for Sift was engraved at its center. Having already guessed what it was, Senior Marshal Brother Cheng still asked, "What's this?" Li faintly smiled and said, "This is the command medallion of a yin-sifting sect elder that the devil cultivator left behind. It's an ancient treasure of some power, and should be sufficient to confirm his identity." The others turned their gazes to the medallion upon hearing this. When they saw how strange the medallion was, they didn't doubt Li's words. The others couldn't help but ask about the details of the battle, but Li simply played the matter off. When the others saw that he didn't feel like talking, they tactfully remained silent. However, they all still intended to befriend Li. After all, he was someone who could slay a mid-nascent soul-stage devil cultivator, and there were many benefits to befriending such a powerful figure. Since the others had come with the intention of helping Li, he treated them courteously and chatted with them on the way back. Halfway back, Li and Senior Marshal Brother Cheng took their leave from the rest of the group and returned to the Drifting Cloud sect. Within the official hall of the sect, the silver-haired old man asked the question that was lingering in his mind. "Did you find the method of dissolving the soul seal curse? I saw that you had a heavy heart on the way back and were forcing yourself to appear calm. Could it be that you didn't find it?" Li took a seat on a chair and wryly smiled as he answered. The yin-sifting sect elder only knew the method to cast the curse, not dissolve it. According to what I found out from the soul-searching technique, only the yin-sifting sect master and the sect's great elder know it. All the other elders wouldn't know the method to dissolve it either. He didn't know the method to dissolve the curse. Senior Marshal Brother Cheng frowned and spoke with a tone of disbelief. Li's wore a gloomy expression. "That's right. It seems that the removal of the soul seal curse involves an incredibly powerful technique belonging to the yin-sifting sect. Only the sect master and the great elder are ever taught it." Senior Marshal Brother Cheng's expression turned grave. "Without the method to dissolve the curse, little sister Nangong will." Li's gaze flickered and he continued, "Although there is no way to directly dissolve the curse, it's not as if there are no other methods in this world. From what I managed to discover by searching the soul of the yin-sifting sect elder, there is a method to forcefully break the curse with the assistance of a few particular items." With roused spirits, the old man asked, "What items are able to dissolve the curse? Please tell me." Li sighed and said, "These items are all incredibly difficult to find in this world. I fear I may not be able to find them." He then muttered the name of the items, leaving Senior Marshal Brother Cheng alarmed. The old man muttered, "Not to mention the heavenly south, but I fear that the entire world might not have these items." Li's mouth twitched and he calmly replied, "This might not be certain. I just so happen to know the whereabouts of one of the items, but it will be difficult to acquire. I must carefully prepare to even have a chance at it." The old man was shocked by what he heard, but seeing that Li didn't intend to give any further details, he didn't ask further. Instead, he sincerely said, "Is this a matter that the sect can help with? Please do not restrain yourself." After a moment of silence, Li shook his head and said, "No, this isn't a matter that can be solved with numbers." The old man twirled his beard. "Since Junior Marshal Brother seems to be well aware of the situation, I won't ask about it. But if there is anything that you need, please don't hesitate to use the sect." Li smiled and said, "Thank you, I appreciate your kindness. I'll be going to visit Wanner now." Senior Marshal Brother Cheng bid Li farewell and remained alone in the hall. After a moment of thought, he sighed and flew towards his cave residence. The hidden room was untouched, as well as the block of ice that laid within. Li stood in front of it and looked at the girl frozen inside with a confused expression. It was unknown how long Li stood there before a complicated expression flickered over his face. He softly muttered, "Wanner, your courage is truly great. To grasp the chance for life, you refined the most dangerous technique of your incarnation arts, the youthful celestial moon. Could it be that you didn't know that this technique would cause you to be reborn? If I truly dispelled your soul seal curse, it could trigger something from your technique. How could I not be worried?" His voice grew softer as he spoke. He then touched the thick and dense block of ice and caressed Nangongwan's face. "You couldn't have known that the cultivator who placed the curse on you didn't know how to dispel it, but there isn't too much to worry about. From the soul search, I found another method to dissolve the curse by using some items. Although these items are extremely rare in this world, It is fortunate that Devil Fall Valley happens to contain one of them. While the inner core of an ancient flame beast would normally be impossible to find, it just so happens that an ancient flame toad is currently within Devil Fall Valley. I will not hesitate to enter the valley in several years' time. But it was said that this method can only dissolve the curse halfway, and even if it isn't successful, it will greatly weaken it and give me enough time to pay a visit to the state of Jin. When that happens, I will return with the method to rid you of this curse, regardless of what must be done. As Han Li spoke those last words, his voice grew frigid. After speaking to Nangong Wan, gloom filled his heart. After staying inside the hidden room for a moment more, he walked out and flew back towards his cave residence. In the main hall of his cave residence, Han Li sat down with his head lowered in thought. Silvermoon obediently stood by his side, her eyes continuously shifting toward Han Li's with a trace of playfulness. Without turning his head, Han Li indifferently asked, "What is there to look at? Did something break out on my face?" "Master must be joking. I simply wish to know what Master will decide. It is neither a long nor short time before entering Devilfall Valley. Also, both Violet Spirit and Marquis Nanlong invited you to head in. Who are you planning to head into the valley with?" Silvermoon's smile faded away, and then she hesitantly continued. "Devilfall Valley is known to be the most dangerous area in the Heavenly South. Even if Master's abilities are great, it will be exceptionally dangerous to head inside. Are there no other methods to save Miss Nangong Wan? Entering, there is simply too great a risk to take." And Li shook his head and calmly said, "The other items. You mean the eggshell of the myriad dark gold bird, or the fruit of the enlightened flower? These items have long been extinct in this world. Even if they still remained, they would be concealed in a desolate corner of the world and be impossible to find. The demon core of the ancient flame toad is the easiest option. So long as I follow Master Kang Kun's route inside and don't act with greed, I shouldn't meet my end there. As for which party I will join, I'll have to decide that later." Silvermoon lowered her head and offered no contest. "If Master has already decided, then there is nothing for me to say." And Li smiled and rubbed his chin. "Before we enter Devilfall Valley, I must prepare to go to the far west and acquire the final 2 layers for the Great Development Technique. I'll also have to go and see whether or not the 1000 Bamboo School has any designs for high-grade puppets. As for the puppet refinement methods that I acquired from Soaring Heaven City, they can't be used for some time. The materials used to refine them are far too rare. Additionally, their main ingredient, the myriad-year ironwood, requires a large amount of green liquid to mature. They aren't something that I'll be able to refine in a short amount of time. The 1000 Bamboo School should have some puppet designs that possess the strength of a core formation stage cultivator. With those puppets, it will be safer to enter Devilfall Valley. With only a few years, honing my magic treasures or cultivating my techniques wouldn't have much effect." With that said, Han Li narrowed his eyes as if having already thought out his plans. "Master's words do hold reason, let us do as you say." After some thought, Silvermoon smiled and agreed. For a time, a charming expression appeared on her face. Suddenly, something came to Han Li's mind and he frowned. "However, it will be somewhat difficult to arrive at the far west despite it being adjacent to the heavenly south. I'll have to pass through the righteous Tao's state of Zhu and thousands of kilometers of desert." "Desert?" Silvermoon opened her mouth in surprise. "That's right. Not to mention that there is something odd about the desert. For some unknown reason, its skies are always plagued by fierce windstorms. If we wish to pass through it, we'll only be able to walk or our magic power will be exhausted halfway through the journey. Additionally, the far west is the size of only 2 medium-sized countries in the heavenly south and are quite impoverished. As a result, while most of the heavenly south know of their existence, no one finds it worth the effort to make it past the desert. It is also said that the entire area is ruled by the 1000 Bamboo School." Silvermoon frowned and worriedly said, "Since we can't fly through the desert, wouldn't it take far too long? If we walk the entire distance, the round trip would take around a year even if it goes smoothly. That's why I must make preparations before I leave. While preparations are underway, I must also have you help me and will leave this in your hands. Pour green liquid on it and see whether or not it shows signs of life." As Han Li said this, he took out a jade box from his storage pouch and handed it over to her. Silvermoon recognized the contents at a glance and spoke with surprise. "The profound goddess palm. Master, you are letting me handle it." Han Li mysteriously smiled at Silvermoon and said, "Hee, if this item doesn't revive, then it will simply be used as a material for tool refinement. Also, I may as well take advantage of this time to refine the wood spirit nascent. Additionally, I'll have to go down and deal with the corpse demon. I've acquired a method of refining a devil corpse suitable for it from the yin-sifting sect elder. After all, leaving the corpse demon alone is like leaving a calamity waiting to happen inside the Dreamcloud Mountains. With so many matters to attend to, I'll have to hand the matters inside the cave residence over to you. Fine, I'll follow your orders as I was the one who recognized you as my master after all. Silvermoon pursed her lips and agreed with a tone of helplessness. Hanli grinned and spoke a few words more before leaving the main hall. At that moment, Silvermoon suddenly shouted for Hanli to stay after a moment of hesitation. "Master, there is something that has been on my mind for a while. Can I ask you about it?" She wore a stern expression. "What is it?" Hanli turned his head to look at Silvermoon, his curiosity written all over his face. With a deliberate tone, Silvermoon asked, "Ever since Master has taken me in as an artifact spirit, he hasn't used me as an artifact spirit in battle or to boost the power of his flying swords. Could you tell me why?" Hanli frowned in surprise and asked, "Why are you asking this?" Silvermoon lowered her head and whispered, "It's nothing but a casual question. After all, my true identity is that of an artifact spirit." After a moment of silence, Hanli said, "Artifact spirit. You believe yourself to be a common artifact spirit. Common artifact spirits don't possess any intelligence. Why even ask such a question? Even if I summoned you as an artifact spirit, it would consume too much of your spirit essence. If one relies on using their artifact spirit too often, it may even lead to the spirit's dispersal. And from my point of view, your demon fox body is very useful to me. Unless it is a last resort, I will not be using you as an artifact spirit. Also, if your cultivation suffers as a result, it wouldn't benefit me either." Afterwards, Hanli turned around and left the hall. Silvermoon remained in the hall, her head lowered as she grew lost in thought. A short moment later, she glanced at the jade box in her hand and walked away with a smile. Once Hanli entered the cave residence, he began to prepare to cultivate the ability for a second nascent soul. Since a divine ability this powerful went beyond the realm of normality, Hanli's preparations to refine this technique lasted for quite a while. At the moment, Hanli was sitting cross-legged on the ground. His hands held a faint azure jade slip, and he was reading through it with his spiritual sense as if trying to comprehend something. The profound nascent formation arts were recorded on the jade slip. A short time later, he withdrew his spiritual sense from the jade slip and closed his eyes. He then formed a hand gesture and began to whisper an incantation. His body froze and azure light flickered from the top of the head, suddenly summoning a nascent soul intertwined with azure light. The nascent soul that Hanli bitterly cultivated for 200 years to create. The nascent soul appeared slightly more powerful than when it first appeared several years ago. Its eyes were a shiny jet black and appeared intelligent. Having only cultivated his nascent soul for several years, he only dared to manifest it in an extremely safe area, else it could be weakened if something unexpected happened. It sat on Hanli's head for a moment more, and glanced around the room before suddenly enveloping itself in a ball of azure light and floating around the hidden room. At first it was unaccustomed to fly, but as it became more practiced, it was able to do it increasingly faster. In the end, the nascent soul was able to fly erratically around the hidden room in a display of vast skill. After another moment, the nascent soul stopped and floated to the corner of the hidden room as if thinking of something. It grasped its small hands in an incantation gesture, and in a flash of light, the nascent soul suddenly disappeared and then reappeared above Hanli's head, its complexion slightly pale from having exhausted so much of its vitality. This was the divine ability that only nascent souls were capable of, true instantaneous movement. The nascent soul stretched its back and turned into a streak of white light before entering Hanli's head. Hanli then slowly opened his eyes, his expression appearing grave. It appears the nascent soul has consolidated after several years of nurturing. Although it cannot compare to the nascent souls of those old eccentrics, there shouldn't be a problem if I refine the second nascent soul. Hanli muttered to himself. Soon after, he slapped his storage pouch and summoned a jade box covered in talismans. Hanli swept his sleeve with a stern expression and dispersed all the talismans from the box. He then pointed to the corner of the box and had it open by itself. As it slowly opened, it revealed a sparkling golden sphere that sealed the wood spirit nascent within it. The soul fade technique that I placed on it is almost complete, Hanli muttered to himself. Then after a moment of thought, he raised his hand and reached out towards the golden sphere. In a clap of thunder, golden light flickered and countless arcs of lightning shot out from the lightning sphere. The lightning quickly flew into Hanli's hand and disappeared without a trace. In the blink of an eye, the sphere disappeared to reveal a small green figure several inches tall with a delicate appearance. It was the wood spirit nascent. But at the moment, the wood spirit nascent was densely covered in jet-black needles, and its eyes were shut as if it were sleeping. The fine black needles would occasionally flicker with green light in a rather strange display. Han Li didn't dare to be careless as he carefully examined the wood spirit nascent and jet-black needles once through. When it appeared that everything was as expected, he slowly extended his index finger towards the forehead of the wood spirit nascent. Before he fully extended the finger, a bean-sized ball of green light burst from his fingertip and transformed into a green thread of light. Han Li's hand remained still as the thread pierced into the nascent soul's forehead, reading the internal circumstances of the nascent soul. After the time it took to finish a meal, Han Li sighed and withdrew his finger, recalling the green thread as well. Han Li stroked his chin as he pondered over his next actions. Suddenly, he waved his hand and the needles surrounding the wood spirit nascent flew into his sleeve. As a result, the wood spirit nascent remained inside the wooden box, still entirely unconscious. Having already decided what to do, he formed a strange incantation gesture with his hands and struck the wood spirit nascent with a spell seal. The wood spirit nascent floated from the jade box and reached the height of Han Li's head. It then sat cross-legged across from Han Li, who shut his eyes and gave a command. An azure light shined from the top of his head, manifesting his nascent soul once more. This time, the nascent soul did not appear as happy as it was before. Instead, its expression was taut and solemn. It raised its head to glance at the wood spirit nascent floating across from it. Its figure then blurred as it approached the wood spirit nascent that sat cross-legged. The wood spirit nascent was only 2 inches tall, an inch shorter than Han Li's nascent soul. When the two stood side by side, they appeared at odds. But at that moment, Han Li's nascent soul began to utter a cryptic incantation before shooting a ball of azure spirit essence directly onto the face of the wood spirit nascent. The spirit nascent's expression stirred and it slowly opened its eyes. However, its expression was dull and its eyes were lifeless as if it were a puppet. Han Li's nascent soul appeared as if it were facing a great enemy. It quickly formed incantation gestures and glared at the wood spirit nascent with wide eyes. In that moment, 2 beams of azure light shot out of the nascent soul's eyes and directly entered the eyes of the wood spirit nascent across from it. Suddenly, the 2 figures shook and the wood spirit nascent screamed in pain before dropping from the sky and rolling on the floor as if suffering from immense pain. At that same moment, Han Li's nascent soul floated in the air and also wore a pained expression on its face, but it was still able to forcefully retain control. The painful screams from within the room intermittently appeared throughout the entire day before eventually disappearing. 2 days later, Han Li walked out from the room with a tired face, but a trace of excitement was betrayed from his eyes. In the past, he was scared of the potential backlash from invading the wood spirit nascent's consciousness. As a result, he didn't immediately cast the techniques to establish a second nascent soul, and instead used the soul fade technique from the profound yin arts and the fading needles to weaken the wood spirit nascent. After being weakened for such a long period of time, the wood spirit nascent's consciousness was now completely weakened. Under such circumstances, Han Li was able to easily erase the last trace of its consciousness with his immensely powerful spiritual sense. With the wood spirit nascent's consciousness erased, he poured a fragment of his spiritual sense into it and used the secret technique to assimilate the nascent soul as his own. Although it was said that there was a danger of backlash during assimilation, Han Li had a powerful grasp over his spiritual sense and wasn't likely to suffer a problem in this regard. And if something did happen, he would only have to abandon the fragment of his spiritual sense at most. Given how powerful his spiritual sense was, the loss wouldn't cause him much harm. As for the duration of the assimilation process, it would take anywhere from 3 to 8 years, or 10 if he were unlucky. Han Li didn't believe that the second nascent soul would be usable during his time in Devil Fall Valley in the first place, so he wasn't worried about the delay. After leaving the sealed room, Han Li rested for a day and went to purchase some tool refinement materials from the market city. Afterwards, he stayed in the tool refinement room for half a month, crafting a dozen variously sized silver stakes. He then brought them to the mountain next to the swamp where the snowcloud foxes dwelled. When Han Li arrived at the stone room at the center of the mountain, he stared at the cadaver demon laying on the stone platform. Although he had expected this, he still felt some relief. He took out a jade box from his storage pouch that was sealed with a golden talisman, and then took out the silver stakes one by one as he watched the reclining cadaver demon. The cadaver demon didn't appear any different from when he last saw it. There was green fur on its body, and it was completely bound in silver chains, not to mention that it still only had a single arm. And Li took the time to carefully examine the entire stone room once through. After recognizing that it was exactly the same as he had left it, he felt at ease and tossed a jade box onto the floor. He then slapped a spirit beast pouch at his waist and summoned a streak of black light before him. Weeping Soul Beast had just appeared in its miniature foot-tall form. As soon as the beast appeared, it immediately saw the cadaver demon lying down on the stone platform and began to howl. Before Han Li even gave a command, its entire body glowed in black light and it expanded. Fortunately, the beast knew the area was narrow and only grew to a height of 3 meters, but it still stared at the cadaver demon with excitement nevertheless. Han Li frowned at this, but while he sank into thought, the weeping soul beast soon calmed down and crouched on the ground in an obedient manner. Yi, when Han Li saw the back of the weeping soul beast, a baffled expression appeared on his face. The image of the blood ghost on the back of the weeping soul beast was far clearer than before. The ghostly image even began to protrude from its back as if it were alive, much to Han Li's excitement. It seemed that the last 2 feasts for the weeping soul beast were almost enough for it to undergo another strange transformation. A trace of anticipation accompanied Han Li's surprise, but now was not the time to closely examine the weeping soul beast. The only reason he had released it right now was to protect against any surprises from the cadaver demon. Han Li slapped his storage pouch and summoned an antique jade stick into his hand with a flash of yellow light. Han Li glanced at the jade stick with a raised brow. The item was a hair ornament that he had acquired from the black-robed youth's corpse after searching through his consciousness. The ornament contained over 10 different methods for refining corpses. These methods were something the Yin-sifting sect had acquired after stealthily fighting for them with other sects. As for this specific Yin-sifting sect elder, he turned out to be particularly knowledgeable about the methods for refining corpses. These dozen corpse refinement methods were all things that came from his own understanding. There were even some alterations that he had made that increased the might of a refined corpse. However, it was a pity that he had never shared these methods with his fellow sect members. He had always wished to refine a few top-grade corpses to run amok with, but he had never found any suitable corpses to refine. One of the methods he recorded mentioned the Sovereign Devil corpse, a top-grade corpse the black-robed youth had always wanted to refine. This method required a ferocious corpse that possessed an intelligence of its own as an ingredient. After erasing the consciousness of the corpse, one would use many kinds of secret techniques to refine it, hopefully turning it into a sovereign devil corpse. Naturally, the resulting power would be even greater than that of other intelligent corpses. According to what was recorded, it was one of the most optimal methods for refining the cadaver demon. Once refined, the ferocity of this naturally formed corpse would become even stronger. As a result, Han Li immediately thought of the cadaver demon once he read through this technique. This was a prime opportunity that he couldn't let slip by. But before Han Li could refine it, he needed to erase the cadaver demon's consciousness just like with the wood spirit nascent. As a result, he had taken out the jade box that contained the cadaver demon's primal soul. Han Li looked at the silver stakes in front of him and waved at them, causing the stakes to float into the air. Then, with an incantation, they began to glow with a faintly silver light. Next, he rolled his hands together, summoning several arcs of golden lightning from between his palms. Thunder roared with the appearance of the astonishing golden light. Han Li then expressionlessly raised his hands, shooting out over 10 fine arcs of lightning, striking each of the dozen stakes. As golden and silver light intertwined, the stakes trembled. When Han Li saw this, his expression sank before uttering the word, "Go," and striking the stakes with a spell seal. All of the stakes immediately shot out as streaks of silver, quickly surrounding the cadaver demon on the platform. They were all aimed at the vital points and limbs of its body, in preparation to strike. With all of this done, Han Li took a deep breath and looked at the jade box in front of him that was still sealed with a golden talisman. He then opened his mouth and azure light shot, engulfing the jade box. The golden talisman trembled several times and eventually floated off the surface of the box. Whoosh! The jade box immediately flew 10 meters forward as if it was struck. Han Li's pupils contracted as he watched, his lips tightly closed. A dense green fog suddenly rolled out from the box and a wild laughter sounded from it. "I am finally freed. Who was the fool that released me? Since you freed me, I'll be consuming your flesh. Yi, a nascent soul cultivator." The green mist condensed to form a woman's face, exactly the same as Silvermoon's human form apart from the fearsome green light glowing from her eyes. She appeared stunned upon seeing Han Li. Han Li was also surprised to see such a familiar face, but soon all emotion disappeared from his face. The transformation of Silvermoon's demon fox body had been something that the cadaver demon originally created, so this appearance was to be expected from the primal soul of the cadaver demon. The green ghost face was stunned for a moment before coldly laughing. She opened her mouth and blew out strong yin winds. The ghost face soon grew 3 meters tall, and it charged towards Han Li in an attempt to enter his body. However, Han Li had already prepared for this. No matter how powerful the cadaver demon had been when it was alive, Han Li had no fear of it since it was now just a primal soul that had been trapped for many years. As he watched all of this happen, a cold glint flickered in his eye. Without receiving an order, the weeping soul beast snorted and shot out a mist of yellow light. The light swept past half of the ghost face and immediately prevented it from moving. What's this? In a display of quick wits, the ghost face felt that something was amiss and struggled to break free. But unfortunately for it, the weeping soul beast's ability was specialized in restraining souls. Not only was the ghost face unable to escape, it was also slowly being absorbed by the mist of yellow light. The ghost face was now filled with fear, but in a display of decisiveness, the green mist violently swayed and split off the portion of it that was trapped in the yellow mist of light. It then took advantage of this opening to roil and form a smaller ghost face. At the same time, it hastily turned around and shot towards the cadaver demon at the center of the stone platform. Knowing that Han Li couldn't be trifled with, it planned to return to its original body and then tear Han Li apart. Han Li smirked upon seeing this. He calmly pointed to the 10 or so stakes revolving around the cadaver demon, and they fell upon it as quick as lightning the moment the ghost face entered the cadaver demon's body. With gusts of wind, the cadaver demon suddenly found all of its vitals and limbs had been struck by the silver stakes. Although its limbs were incredibly hard and hadn't been harmed by the silver stakes, the golden lightning from the stakes attacked without compromise, instantly forming a golden net around the cadaver demon. Suddenly, a fishy scent filled the air from the direction of the cadaver demon's body. Just as the cadaver demon's primal soul had entered its body, the stakes had actually knocked it back out. Green ghost mist then surrounded the body where a large and a small ghost face could be faintly seen inside the mist. The 2 ghost faces were doing their utmost to enter the body of the cadaver demon's body. However, the golden arcs of lightning sparking off the silver stakes warded them off, each strike resulting in a pained scream. As expected, there was a fragment of consciousness hidden inside the body. It seems these preparations wasn't done in vain. Han Li appeared delighted at the sight of this. With his last trace of worry now resolved, he promptly commanded the weeping soul beast. It instantly snorted, puffing out 2 mists of golden lights towards the ghost faces, both far brighter than the one from before. The 2 ghost faces weren't as lucky as they were before. When the mists of yellow light swept over, the 2 ghost faces released cold screams before being swept into the weeping soul beast's mouth. The weeping soul beast swallowed several times and pounded its chest with excitement while appearing quite satisfied. Han Li smiled at the sight of this and returned his gaze to the silver stakes. He then walked towards the cadaver demon's body. When Han Li arrived at the stone platform, he looked at the silver chains surrounding the cadaver demon. Then, after a moment of thought, he flicked his finger and chopped at them with a golden sword streak. With a loud ring, the silver chains remained unharmed. Han Li appeared to have anticipated this and spat a small golden sword from his mouth. With a hand-seal command, the small sword glowed with brilliant light and silently streaked past the chain. With a brittle clang and a flash of golden light, a rice-sized hole appeared through the chain. Han Li's expression stirred. Although he knew that the silver chain was extraordinarily strong for it to be able to restrain the cadaver demon, it was still greatly surprising that the auric essence-infused bamboo cloudswarm swords were only able to harm it to this degree. During his amazement, Han Li continued casting incantation seals from his hands and ordered the flying sword to continue striking the same location on the chain. Only after a long while was the silver chains eventually severed by Han Li. He then curiously beckoned to the 2 pieces of cut silver chain, and it marvelously slid off the cadaver demon's body as if it were a snake and flew into Han Li's hand. After stroking the silver chains in his hands, he discovered that its surface was exceptionally smooth and was densely covered in small talisman characters. They were so small that they could barely be seen by the human eye. Han Li's expression stirred, shock appearing in his eyes. Such tiny talisman characters weren't something that could be created in the current cultivation world in the heavenly south. That meant this chain was an extremely rare ancient treasure. With that thought, silver light flashed from his hands, and the cut pieces of silver chain were withdrawn into his storage pouch. When he had the time later, he planned on seeing whether or not he could restore the chain and test their might. With the silver chain gone, he lowered his head to look down at the cadaver demon's sinister body. His expression grew sullen, and he flicked his fingers, piercing several parts of the cadaver demon's body with azure threads. Han Li then began to examine it, revealing an expression of satisfaction afterwards. Apart from the missing arm, the cadaver demon was ideal for a refined corpse. Not only was its body incredibly formidable to the point where common magic treasure couldn't harm it in the slightest, but just a small amount of the corpse fire and poison that it produced could immediately kill a cultivator. When he looked at the cadaver demon's destroyed arm, a thought appeared in Han Li's mind. He slapped a spirit beast pouch at his waist and released a swarm of black-tainted gold-devouring beetles. They loudly buzzed as they circled around his head before he raised his hand and struck them with a spell seal. Then, with a mental command, the beetles condensed around the corpse demon's missing arm. A moment later, a new black, silver, and gold arm appeared in the gap. Apart from the color contrasting with the green fur on the rest of its body, it appeared exactly the same as its other arm. Han Li smiled, revealing a trace of satisfaction. In the following moments, he took out several formation flags and formation discs and arranged them in a profound spell formation. After spending 2 months at the center of the mountain, Han Li returned to his cave residence. His face was extremely pale, as if he had exhausted much of his vitality. After Silvermoon greeted him, he wordlessly secluded himself in a hidden room and didn't mention anything about the cadaver demon. After a month, the large door opened once more, and Han Li calmly walked out from the room. Standing guard outside his room, Silvermoon respectfully said, "Master, the 6-winged frost centipedes have already begun to hatch in the insect room." Han Li smiled upon hearing her and said, "Let's go and have a look then." Soon after, he quickly made his way to the insect room with Silvermoon following him in an elegant motion. Han Li opened the restrictions guarding the way to the insect room and clearly saw what laid within. The newly hatched 6-winged frost centipedes were larger than the first generation, and the glacial chi they breathed was far stronger than before. Although it wasn't comparable to the celestial ice flames, it would still be fatal to cultivators at the core formation stage. Of course, when fused into the purple apex flames, they became far more deadly. The eggs of the 6-winged frost centipedes shined with black light at the center of the insect room. They were fist-sized and surrounded by 3-meter-wide chunks of ice. The ice chi pervading the room clearly originated from these eggs. Han Li swept his gaze across the room. The huge centipedes seemed to have sensed something and raised their heads, snarling in the direction of the stone door as if they felt threatened. With a changed expression, Han Li glanced down at the insect eggs and closely examined them. After counting the number of eggs, Han Li nodded and said, "There are 24 eggs, enough to use. Silvermoon, call for my in-name disciple to come over and tell her she can take her centipedes." "Yes, I will send the voice transmission talisman." Silvermoon agreed and took out a talisman. After whispering a few words into it, she tossed it into the air and it flew off in a streak of red light. Finished with the centipede eggs, Han Li turned his attention to the gold-devouring beetles in the next room. Because the green liquid had been prioritized for the 6-winged frost centipedes, Han Li hadn't paid much attention to his specifically selected gold-devouring beetles. There were no changes to the beetles in the room. They were still concentrated in a huge golden ball, suspended on a spirit tree that Han Li had specifically planted there. Although he had anticipated this, Han Li still frowned at the sight. When those flying beetles evolved once more, they could be considered fully mature. Even with the acceleration from the rainbow skirt grass, the long process of their evolution was nearly unbearable. Han Li hadn't thought that in a mere several tens of years, the gold-devouring beetles would finally reach the last stage of maturation. Han Li withdrew his gaze from the insect room and asked, "Silvermoon, how is the profound goddess palm? It's been several months. That should be enough to tell if it can be saved." Silvermoon replied with hesitation, "It's hard to say. It would be better if Master took a look personally." What could be hard to say? Han Li appeared puzzled, but after a moment of thought, he ordered Silvermoon to take him to the medicine garden. A trace of astonishment appeared in Han Li's eyes when he saw the stalkroot of the profound goddess palm. Its original faint yellow color was turning green, but it was still bare and small, without any hint of emerging buds. How can this be? Is the plant alive or dead? Contrary to what he saw, Han Li didn't sense any aura of life from it. Silvermoon sighed and slowly said, "This was what I wished to tell Master. The profound goddess palm's root was watered several times by the green liquid without any change. It was only after using both the myriad-year spirit milk combined with the wine nectar that I was able to change its color. I originally believed it was brought back to life, but apart from the change in color, it's exactly the same. The green liquid also had no effect on it. As a result, I was left with my hands tied. It's unknown whether the profound goddess palm root is actually alive or dead." Looking at the profound goddess palm root, Han Li indifferently said, "Since it reacted, there is still a chance of reviving it. We simply need to find another method, but now is not the time to continue experimenting with it. We'll have to settle our affairs in the far west first. It is about time for us to leave." "We're going now?" Silvermoon asked. And Li firmly replied, "We're leaving tomorrow. In a moment, I am going to bid farewell to Senior Marshal Brother Cheng. Afterwards, I will seal my cave residence and take the most important items. The Far West shouldn't have any formidable high-grade cultivators, so it shouldn't prove very dangerous, just time-consuming. Also, we must make it back within 3 years, or we'll miss the prime window to enter Devilfall Valley." Silvermoon nodded after he finished speaking. Soon, the two left the medicine garden. As Han Li left to see his senior marshal Brother Cheng, Silvermoon was left behind in the cave residence to put it in order for their departure the next day. The next morning, Han Li brought Silvermoon out of the cave residence to discover there was a beautiful woman of graceful stature waiting outside for Han Li. A trace of surprise appeared in his eyes as he asked, "What is it? Didn't I give you enough medicine pills to last you for several years of peaceful cultivation?" Mu Paling lowered her head and whispered, "My lord, after some thought, I've decided it may be better for me to go on this journey with you since my cultivation has reached a bottleneck. As your concubine, serving my lord is only natural. Will you bring me?" Her beautiful appearance was capable of arousing a feeling of great adoration. When Han Li heard her, he gave her an appraising look and pondered to himself for a moment. As Silvermoon stood behind him, her eyes wandered and she mysteriously smiled. Not long after, Han Li nodded and said, "Since you wish to go, then so be it. On the way, I can give you some guidance on cultivation. The sooner you can reach core formation stage, the better it will be for me." "Many thanks, my lord." Mu Paling was overjoyed upon hearing this and wore an expression of excitement. When Han Li saw this, he smiled and flung his sleeve, releasing the wind-riding chariot in a streak of white light. When Silvermoon saw the carriage, she giggled and entered Han Li's sleeve in a blur. When Mu Paling saw this, her jaw dropped in shock. Han Li paid this no mind and calmly said, "I'll talk to you about Silvermoon on the way. Let's head out first." "Yes, my lord." Mu Paling quickly restored her calm and made her way toward the carriage with lithe steps. Just as she stepped inside, Han Li entered the carriage in an azure blur. He formed a hand incantation, and a layer of white light suddenly covered the flying carriage. Then, with a clear ring, the wind-riding chariot streaked across the sky and disappeared from sight. Not long after, some information began to spread in the Drifting Cloud sect that their elder Han had suffered a slight loss in vitality as a result of a confrontation with a devil cultivator, and would be secluding himself for several years to restore his cultivation. When the two other sects in the Dreamcloud Mountains heard this, they sent several people to inquire about the state of Han Li's injuries, but Elder Cheng didn't give them a concrete answer. The cultivators that were friends of the Drifting Cloud sect were also denied an answer over the matter. Thus, news that the newly famous Elder Han of the Drifting Cloud sect had sustained heavy injuries quickly spread throughout the state of Zai and through the sects of neighboring countries. The cultivators of these sects didn't suspect this news in the slightest. After all, the last devil cultivator that injured him was an elder of the Jin Empire's yin-sifting sect that W rumored to be at the peak of mid-nascent soul stage. It was no surprise that killing him would result in a large loss in vitality. But even so, Han Li quickly became viewed as a vastly powerful cultivator who stood on par with eccentric Heaven-Venge. Likewise, the fame of the Drifting Cloud sect rose rapidly alongside him, and there were few sects that didn't begin trying to befriend the sect. There were even a few vagrant cultivators with profound cultivation that came to the Dreamcloud Mountains to enter the Drifting Cloud sect. In a short amount of time, the Drifting Cloud sect gained a faint standing of the top sect in the state of Zai. Many Drifting Cloud sect disciples grew excited about their mysterious Elder Han, and he rose to be their most well-regarded idol for a time. The heavenly South continent state of Dongyu is one of the few rare countries that didn't belong to any of the continent's four superpowers. This wasn't because the country was too small or that it was lacking in resources. Rather, the country's size and wealth of cultivation resources placed it among the top 10 countries in the heavenly South. The reason why the state of Dongyu was unaffiliated with any of the four superpowers was due to its location. Apart from the Nine Nations Union, who was too far away, the country shared a close border at the center of the three other superpowers. As for the country's cultivator sects, their histories and affiliations were varied as well. There were righteous and devil Dao sects as well as a few small leisurely sects, but most important of all were the native sects that couldn't be suppressed by any other power. They became the deciding factor that prevented the state of Dongyu from being influenced by the other superpowers. None of the three neighboring superpowers wished to relinquish control of the country, and they continuously conducted their own maneuvers, both covert and open, but to little effect. In the end, there was only a vague agreement between the three superpowers that they would not interfere with the country and had the state of Dongyu become a neutral territory. Of course, the various native sects of the country had secretly received backing from the three superpowers, forcibly maintaining a balance of power. This led to various cultivators gathering in this neutral country, causing it to flourish for some time. In the state of Dongyu's northern Chang province, there was a depression that took up 2/3 of its land. The majority of the depression was covered in dense forest, and there was an unbroken mountain range that spanned tens of thousands of kilometers at its center, known as the Myriad Link Mountain Range by the locals. No one truly knew if the mountain range consisted of 10,000 mountains, but it still had an abundance of demon beasts and rare medicines. However, no cultivators dare to rashly enter the mountains. The Myriad Link Mountain Range was known by a far more sinister name in the heavenly South cultivation world, the Devil Fall Domain, and somewhere hidden in the mountain range lay the most dangerous area in the heavenly South, Devil Fall Valley. Ever since Devil Fall Valley came into existence, countless vastly powerful cultivators entered the valley in search of treasure, but the veil of mystery and death that surrounded it over the years prevented anyone from treading too closely. Of course, its fearsome reputation alone hadn't stopped cultivators from extracting the mountain's resources. That was due to the miasma that would occasionally sweep across the mountains and seal it off for years at the time, perhaps as a result of Devil Fall Valley's influence. Not only was the miasma incredibly toxic, but it was also as thick as something produced by a spell formation and would cover the mountains in complete darkness. It was impossible to tell direction once inside. Even if one could make it past the miasma, it was impossible to catch any demon beasts or pick any herbs. All one could do was stare at the mountains with envy or go to the few areas where the miasma was most thin. But every 50 years or so, the miasma around the mountains would disappear, and the spatial tiers surrounding Devil Fall Valley became more stable and sparse. During this time period, treasure hunters from all over the heavenly South would gather for this year-long opening to seek riches. With such a large mountain range, only a small portion of cultivators were able to reap the treasures despite how abundant the demon beasts and spirit medicines may be. Despite this, there would be thousands of cultivators that came during each opening. Furthermore, there were a few merchants being backed by various clan powers nearby the mountain. They would create several temporary market cities in the area, prospering from the medicines and spirit beasts acquired within the mountains. Recently, the miasma around the Devil Fall domain had already begun to grow thin and would soon disappear. It would be at least several more months before the miasma disappears, but there were several times more cultivators there than during the previous opening. Furthermore, a large number of high-grade cultivators had appeared amongst them, startling the local cultivator sects and clans. The local powers hastily restricted their disciples from rashly going out and sent men to investigate the cause of it. As a result, they were stunned by what they found. On the top of some nameless hill on the border of the Chang province, there was a core formation male-female pair that were standing side by side. The man was wearing dark blue robes and appeared to be 30 years of age with a scholarly appearance. The woman wore palace robes and her body was ample, but her face appeared unremarkable. The couple appeared to be calm, but a trace of anxiousness was betrayed by their flickering eyes, exposing their true emotions. After a moment, a silver light flickered from a distance, followed by the appearance of a silver streak shooting towards them. When the pair saw the streak of light, they appeared overjoyed. The silver streak arrived above the small mountain, and flew a circle around them before revealing an embroidered-robed scholarly man around the age of 40. When the woman saw the scholarly man, she smiled and said, "Big brother, you finally arrived. How did it go? Did you manage to receive the command medallion to enter the valley?" I've managed to acquire it right on time." The scholarly man smiled and raised his hand as two streaks of azure light shot towards them. The man and the woman quickly reached out their hands to receive the two bronze command medallions. They were both carved with the word Devilfall in red on one side, and with the same word written in gold on the other. There were traces of spiritual chi emitted from the talisman. The woman immediately revealed a face of excitement, but the man frowned and appeared pensive. The woman excitedly said, "This is great. With the Devilfall medallion, we'll be able to enter the valley in search of treasure. If we are able to find even a few spiritual medicines from the age of antiquity, we may find the opportunity to condense a nascent soul." Standing at the woman's side, the blue-clothed man sighed and said, "Such a small pendant is actually worth over 30,000 spirit stones. They actually dare to sell it at that price." The three command medallions had cost them over 100,000 spirit stones. It took the entirety of the wealth they had gathered over several hundred years to obtain them. It was only natural for him to feel a bit of heartache over the matter. The scholarly man helplessly said, "Second brother, don't feel too bad about it. If it weren't for the friendship we forged with them and the lacking manpower of their sect, we definitely wouldn't have had the opportunity to acquire these medallions from them. Being able to purchase even a single command medallion for 100,000 spirit stones is something that many would fight over. Furthermore, the Ghost Spirit Sect originally planned on pursuing the treasures of Devilfall Valley by themselves. Now that the other sects are pressuring them, they have no other option but to allow outsiders to join them on the treasure expedition. Otherwise, the Ghost Spirit Sect wouldn't have agreed to allow us to enter the valley even if we gave them 100,000 spirit stones." When the blue-clothed cultivator heard this, he wasn't able to say anything back. But when he looked at the command medallion in his hand, he worriedly asked, "However, can we trust the Ghost Spirit Sect's method of entering the valley? I heard that the valley's opening has many spatial tiers. If one isn't careful, they wouldn't even leave any remains behind. There's also the news of the Ghost Spirit Sect elder coming back from the valley alive. Does elder brother believe this to be true?" The scholarly man promptly responded, "Apart from the fact that the Ghost Spirit Sect treats the entire Heavenly South cultivation world as an enemy, there should be no question over the matter. Furthermore, didn't we also hear that only the Ghost Spirit Sect elder's nascent soul made it out of Devilfall Valley? It sounds reasonable since his body met its end in the valley itself." After listening to the scholarly man's explanation, he hesitantly said, "However, even if we can enter the valley, it's still extremely dangerous. Could it have been a mistake to buy these medallions to enter the valley?" The woman snorted and carelessly said, "With our talents, we've already reached the peak of our realm. If we don't have any chance encounters, we will definitely perish in 200 years. It is natural to take this opportunity when it presents itself to us. Also, I heard the spatial tiers on the outer areas of Devilfall Valley are far less dangerous than those inside the depths. So long as we are careful, it shouldn't pose too much danger." The scholarly man calmly said, "I heard that the Ghost Spirit Sect had issued several hundred Devilfall medallions. Furthermore, most of them were dropped into the hands of various sects. It is even said that a few Mulan spell warriors are participating, and that the Ghost Spirit Sect are sending several hundred cultivators into the valley. With so many people inside, what do we have to fear? Besides, if worst comes to worst, we can simply leave. But if we miss this opportunity, we will live the rest of our lives with regret." The woman at his side nodded at his words as if having deeply thought of the matter. "Since Big Brother has said as such, this little brother will follow him into the valley." The blue-clothed man bitterly smiled and said nothing else. As this was happening, various other movements occurred throughout the Chang province. Half a year ago, rumors began to spread that the Ghost Spirit Sect had acquired a method to enter Devilfall Valley, and that they wished to conceal this information from other sects so they could monopolize the treasures of the valley. These rumors had caused a massive uproar throughout the continent. The various righteous Dao sects and heavenly Dao sects wishing to recuperate from their war with the Mulan could no longer sit still, so they each sent men to the Ghost Spirit Sect to ask over the matter. As for their fellow devil Dao sects, they also sent men to verify the truth of the matter. The higher echelon of the Ghost Spirit Sect was enraged by this, but after being held under such scrutiny and pressure, they were forced to admit the truth. After all, so long as someone carefully investigated the matter, traces of the truth would eventually be revealed. As a result, The other sects bluntly requested that they share the method to enter the valley, but the Ghost Spirit sect had refused to agree for as long as they could. In the end, they could only compromise and issue a few command medallions to enter the valley to various sects. So long as one possessed the medallion, the various sects would be able to send men together with the Ghost Spirit Sect cultivators into the valley when the spatial tiers of Devilfall Valley stabilized. And naturally, each medallion came at a cost of spirit stones. Of course, in order to prevent any resentment from vagrant cultivators, they set aside over 100 medallions specifically for them and a fewer small sects. Now that the time was drawing near, the Chang province became incredibly lively. The vicinity of the myriad Link Mountains became filled with cultivators from other countries, all hoping to enter Devilfall Valley in search of treasure. Needless to mention, they were all the cautious sort as well. The city nearest to the Chang province was named Birchleaf City. It was thousands of kilometers from the myriad Link Mountains, but there were cultivators unwilling to sleep outside, and they decided to sleep in the city instead. This had scared off the small sect originally occupying the city and made them flee back to the sect's mountain. Although there were many cultivators gathering there were many inns in the city as well. There were no problems for them finding accommodations. Among these inns was a somewhat mediocre one by the name of the Good Fortune Tavern. There were two groups of cultivators checked in there, with each one staying in a different wing of the courtyard. In one of the rooms, there were 3 people sitting around a wooden table and discussing something. These 3 were all young and beautiful female cultivators. They were Violet Spirit and Mei Ning, who Han Li had last seen at Skyforce City, and the third woman was the white-robed woman surnamed Song. At the moment, Violet Spirit was concealing her true appearance under the guise of a common female cultivator, with only a slight beauty. The 3 were softly discussing something with a serious expression. The walls around them glowed with white light, as if under a restriction that prevented them from being eavesdropped on. Violet Spirit frowned and asked with a worried tone, "Big Sister Song, you still haven't received word from Brother Han. It won't be long before the miasma clears entirely. If Brother Han doesn't appear, we will miss the best time to enter Devilfall Valley." Cultivator Song smiled and said, "Little Sister Violet Spirit, you might not know this, but despite Marshal Senior Cheng's proclamation that Marshal Uncle Han had suffered injuries, I had learned in truth that he actually journeyed to the far west. Although I don't know what business he has there, the journey there and back should take a year at the very least. He won't be returning here in a hurry. Besides, there are still several months left. I've left behind the location for where to contact us back at the sect. Once he returns, he will immediately seek us out. We just have to hope that he arrives on time. It's not as if there are cultivators in the far west that can hold down Marshal Uncle Han Li." Reminded of the matter of the Umbra realm, Violet Spirit couldn't help but say, "That is hard to say. Even if fellow Taoist Han's cultivation is profound, there are matters that can't be resolved with a powerful cultivation." Then with a flicker of her eyes she continued, "Big Sister Song, now that you've mentioned Marshal Uncle Han, it seems you now speak of Brother Han with great respect. When you spoke of him before, you didn't hold him in such high esteem." With that said, Violet Spirit wore a mysterious smile. Cultivator Song faintly blushed, but she soon regained her calm. "If little Violet Spirit is also capable of slaying a cultivator at the peak of mid-nascent soul stage, I would also hold you in high regard. Senior Marshal Uncle Han is now on par with the 3 great cultivators of the Heavenly South. As his junior, is it strange for me to speak of him with respect?" Violet Spirit giggled and said, "This is only natural. It came as shock to me when I heard of his accomplishments. 10 years ago, he was still only a core formation cultivator like us, but now he possesses astonishing abilities worthy of our admiration. It is hard to believe. Had we known this earlier, it would have been better to force him to take little sister Mei as a concubine. That would have guaranteed little sister Mei Ning a stable path of cultivation." When Mei Ning heard this, she blushed, but she only snorted and said nothing else. A trace of sadness appeared in her eyes. Han Li had given her the choice, but it was a pity she had hesitated. With Han Li being the giant figure he was now, she could no longer easily mention the matter. Mei Ning nearly became Marshal Uncle Han's concubine. This is the first time I've heard of this. After a moment's pause, Cultivator Song smiled and turned to Violet Spirit. "I've always believed there was some kind of relationship between little sister Violet Spirit and Marshal Uncle Han. After all, your beauty is otherworldly. It is hard to believe that there is a man able to resist your charms." Violet Spirit snorted and said, "Had I known at the time that fellow Taoist Han would later possess such powerful abilities, I might have devoted myself to him. Had I become his Tao companion, my cultivation would be making far greater progress than now. She curled her lips to form a mysterious smile, hiding whether or not she was joking. This led to Cultivator Song feeling at a loss as to whether or not she should cry. After a moment's hesitation, Violet Spirit deliberately said, "If Brother Han truly agrees to help us, we'll be able to smoothly acquire the Spirit Kindle fruit, given his vast abilities. Big Sister Song, are you certain that you will not be entering Devil Fall Valley?" Mei Ning also doesn't wish to go because of the sudden rise of cultivators entering the valley. With her cultivation, it will be too difficult for her. With a moment of thought, Cultivator Song earnestly replied, "I've put much thought into it, but I'm different from the two of you. Although I am only at the early core formation stage, I am only a step away from the next level. It isn't worth it for me to brave such great dangers. As for the treasures of the valley, I am not willing to exchange my life for them. I know my limits. Since Big Sister Song has already decided, I won't persuade you. In truth, if fellow Taoist Han doesn't arrive on time, I will not be heading into the valley alone. With so many high-grade cultivators coming along, the danger will be greatly increased and killing for treasures won't be an uncommon affair. If an early core formation cultivator like me were to enter, that's just asking for trouble. My mind is that muddled." Violet Spirit bitterly smiled and spoke with a dejected tone, leaving Mei Ning and Cultivator Song stunned. With a strange expression on her face, Cultivator Song muttered, "I didn't expect for the Ghost Spirit Sect's plans to be leaked out. At the start, I believed that little sister Violet Spirit had leaked the information and planned to take advantage of the chaos." In a display of feigned anger, Violet Spirit bluntly said, "Take advantage of the chaos. How could I do that? Naturally, the fewer cultivators that enter the valley, the better. It is only under those circumstances that we are able to forcibly catch the Ghost Spirit Sect off guard and pick the Spirit Kindle fruit." Suddenly, a familiar man's voice appeared outside the room. "Oh, so it wasn't fellow Taoist Violet Spirit that spread the information. It seems to be the doing of someone else. Martial Uncle Han. Brother Han." Violet Spirit and Cultivator Song immediately recognized his voice and shouted out his name with pleasant surprise. Violet Spirit raised her hand and struck the door with a spell seal. In a flash of white light, the door slowly opened. There was a youth in his 20s standing there with his hands held behind his back, wearing half-worn-out clothes. He looked at the three women with a slight smile on his face. It was Han Li, who had returned from the far west after spending 2 years there. He was carrying a foot-long yellow bamboo tube behind his back that was slung there as if he didn't have the mind to keep it in a storage pouch. After some careful examination, Han Li appeared somewhat different from before. His bearing and temperament seemed to have undergone a significant change. He appeared even more unwavering and collected, so that it gave people an unfathomable impression. Without further thought, Cultivator Song hastily stepped forward and gave him a curtsy, respectfully saying, "I pay my respects to Martial Uncle Han." "Brother Han, you finally arrived. I was starting to think that something had occupied you and you wouldn't be able to make it on time." As if flustered, Violet Spirit stood up with a trace of a blush on her face. It was unknown how long ago Han Li had arrived. Could it be that he had heard the entire conversation? When she recalled saying that she would have devoted herself to him, she couldn't help but reveal a trace of embarrassment in spite of her quick wit and relaxed manner. "Since I've made an agreement with you, it is only natural to come on time." Han Li smiled and took a deep look at her before calmly entering the room. Mei Ning bit her lip and gave Han Li a salute. He waved his hand and had her stop before taking an empty seat by the table. Violet Spirit quickly regained her calm and sat back down. As for Cultivator Song, she hesitated before sitting back down. Leaving the matter of Devil Fall Valley for later, Violet Spirit asked, "Brother Han, when did you return to the Heavenly South? Was your journey to the Far West smooth?" She then re-examined him with an odd gaze. Han Li smiled and said, "I encountered a few small problems in the Far West. Although they were resolved smoothly, it had taken up a bit of time. Else, I would have returned half a year ago." Violet Spirit and Cultivator Song couldn't help but look at each other, curiosity filling their hearts. A small problem for the current Han Li couldn't have been a small matter, but so long as Han Li didn't want to talk about it, the two would not pursue the topic as a matter of shrewdness. "Earlier I heard that only Lady Violet Spirit wishes to enter Devil Fall Valley." Han Li turned his gaze to the other two women and calmly asked, "Martial Niece Song Mei Ning, have you already made up your minds over the matter?" Since Martial Uncle already knows this, Martial Niece won't conceal it. After some thought and discussion, Fellow Taoist Mei Ning and I both feel that this journey will be too dangerous, so it'd be better for us to not go. I don't wish to risk my life over saving 30 years of cultivation. And not long before, fellow Taoist Mei Ning acquired a medicine pill that will benefit her core formation. She also doesn't wish to put herself in danger. Devil Fall Valley's title as the most dangerous area in the heavenly south isn't something to scoff at. And since the spirit kindle fruit is in the depths of the valley, the risk is even greater. Having heard Cultivator Song's careful words, Han Li nodded and didn't ask any further questions about the matter. It is good that Marshal Niece Song and Lady Mei don't go. There are undoubtedly villains lurking in the myriad Link Mountains. Even if I enter Devil Fall Valley, I may not return alive. Lady Violet Spirit, are you still set on entering the valley? Han Li asked with a casual tone. With a smile, Violet Spirit calmly said, so long as Brother Han is willing to enter the valley, I am willing to brave the risk. I hold fellow Taoist Han in complete confidence. Han Li stared at Violet Spirit and said, since fellow Taoist Violet Spirit has said this, I won't try to persuade you otherwise. But before we enter the valley, there are several matters I must first make clear. Violet Spirit replied without surprise, this is as it should be. If Brother Han has any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. First of all, I need to confirm whether or not the matter of the spirit kindle fruit is true. Han Li's expression grew solemn. I don't want to enter Devil Fall Valley in high hopes only to discover that it didn't exist. I hope Lady Violet Spirit can confirm this for me. Violet Spirit was already prepared for Han Li's question, and she immediately fished out a green jade slip and handed it over to Han Li. The spirit kindle fruit is real. The ghost spirit sect's nascent soul that managed to escape from Devil Fall Valley by a fluke had spoken of its existence. Why else would a ghost spirit sect nascent soul elder strive their hardest to brave the danger of Devil Fall Valley? And Li took the jade slip and submerged his spiritual sense into it and silently looked through it. A moment later, he withdrew his spiritual sense and expressionlessly returned the jade slip. Han Li frowned and hesitantly said, according to what is said, the spirit kindle fruit does exist. However, it is located deep in the depths of Devil Fall Valley, and its precise location is somewhat unclear. It will be difficult to find the spirit kindle fruit with this information alone. Violet Spirit explained as if in fear that Han Li would back down. Because the ghost spirit elder had accidentally stumbled across the spirit kindle fruit after manifesting his nascent soul, he couldn't remember its precise location. However, he also noted several notable facts about its location. It shouldn't be too much of a problem to find it. When Han Li recalled the details inside the jade slip, he pondered, weighing the potential risks and gains. A moment later, Han Li raised his head and calmly asked, even if we find the spirit kindle fruit, won't we need to refine it inside the valley because it would quickly lose its medicinal power? Has Lady Violet Spirit finished preparing the supplementary pill ingredients? Violet Spirit was overjoyed at his response, but she promptly suppressed her excitement. With a bright expression, she said, the supplementary ingredients for the nature origin pill aren't easy to find, but I've managed to piece them together over the past few years. So long as we have the spirit kindle fruit and our luck doesn't take a turn for the worse, there shouldn't be a problem with refining the nature origin pills. Han Li's face turned grim and he emotionlessly said, since it shouldn't be difficult to find, I will make an attempt. But Lady Violet Spirit, you should know of the dangers of Devil Fall Valley. I will make an effort to protect you inside, but be warned that if I encounter a danger that even I cannot withstand, you must be prepared to defend yourself. This is natural. If something truly happens to me, I will not hold it against Brother Han. Besides, I am quite confident in my ability to survive. Violet Spirit replied without any hesitation, the soft lines of her face replaced with staunch resolution. Han Li's expression relaxed as these words were much to his satisfaction. Can you three fellow Taoists inquire on how the Ghost Spirit Sect will be entering the valley? When I arrived, I heard that the Ghost Spirit Sect are issuing Devil Fall medallions to restrict the number of people that can enter the valley. It seems strange. Under such circumstances, there is no difference whether a few hundred or a few thousand cultivators enter the valley. Yet there seems to be a limitation on how many people may enter. Otherwise, the Ghost Spirit Sect would definitely capitalize on this opportunity, as they're selling each Devil Fall medallion for several tens of thousands of spirit stones. After a moment of surprise, Violet Spirit smiled and said, as expected, Brother Han is quite discerning. You've just about guessed the truth. Although Mei Ning and I haven't managed to acquire the specifics of the method to enter the valley, we faintly discovered from our source, that Ghost Spirit Sect disciple, The method of entry requires the power of many ghost spirit sect disciples as well as a large quantity of spirit stones to enter the valley at a specific time. It does seem that the number of people that can enter the valley is limited. Regardless of the method to enter the valley, our drifting cloud sect has been given 3 devil fall medallions, and I acquired one when I had returned to the sect. There should be no problem entering the valley for me, but the depths are a different matter. I have no certainty of making it out safely. I believe that the majority of cultivators will be staying on the outer reaches of the valley and search for their treasure there. Only nascent soul cultivators would dare to enter the depths. Naturally, there will be core formation cultivators that will wish to fight one another, but there shouldn't be too many. Fellow Taoist violet spirit shouldn't experience too many dangers in the outer valley and should be able to handle herself there. As for when we enter the inner valley, Han Li's eyes flickered, and he continued speaking to her through voice transmissions. When Cultivator Song and Mei Ning saw this, they showed no dissatisfaction. Given the immense danger, it was only expected for them to be more careful. When Han Li finished speaking, Violet Spirit hesitated for a moment before nodding. "It is all as Brother Han says. Then I will see you again inside Devil Fall Valley." "Ah yes, Marshal Ni Song, I've heard from the sect disciples that Senior Marshal Brother Cheng has already arrived. Do you know where he is?" Cultivator Song paused before hastily responding. "I do not know. Marshal Senior Cheng had arrived here with a group of his close friends. I haven't seen him yet." So it was like that. It seems Senior Marshal Brother Cheng wishes to enter the valley before he reaches the end of his lifespan. Han Li muttered as if speaking to himself. After a moment of silence, Han Li frowned and asked, "I've also heard that the Mulan will be entering Devil Fall Valley as well. Is this true? Do you have any information on this?" As if feeling a slight headache over the matter, Cultivator Song could only helplessly respond. "We've also heard rumors of this, but the matter is unclear. We don't know if it is true." Han Li stroked his chin and remained silent. A moment later, his expression faintly changed and he bid them farewell. As a result, the 3 women in the room looked at each other with dismay. "What's going on? Why was Brother Han in such a hurry to leave?" Violet Spirit's eyes flickered with bewilderment. Mei Ning frowned, appearing slightly disappointed. "I don't know, but it seems Senior Han has other business to attend to." Cultivator Song glanced at the room's door and muttered to herself for a moment. At that moment, Han Li was walking down a remote street in a calm and methodical manner. But in truth, he was harshly scolding someone in his mind. "Were you trying to scare me out of my mind?" An aged voice carelessly replied within Han Li's mind. He. I was merely thinking that girl named Violet Spirit was deathly beautiful. Stirring a few of your thoughts is only natural." Han Li snorted and angrily continued. "Don't tell me you forgot how you affected the emotions of my second nascent soul when you used the 7 Passions art on it. You can feel whatever you wish, but don't involve me. After all, my second nascent soul is linked with my consciousness. Besides, Violet Spirit's current appearance isn't anything special. You've yet to see her true appearance. And your concubine in the past, Ryan, was said to be a beauty peerless in this world. How can a woman with an appearance like that drive you out of control? You aren't trying to trick me, are you? I originally thought to use the 7 Passions art in order to deal with your primal soul, but who could have thought that a trifling early nascent soul cultivator possessed a second nascent soul and was able to resist calamity? How else would I have met my end here? Although the 7 Passions art cannot control a cultivator's consciousness, it can still control their emotions. Likewise, it can reduce one's will to live in a fight and one's resolution to kill. As for the girl, although she is using some sort of secret technique to hide her true face, I'm able to see through it with my spiritual sense." The old man's voice slowed near the end as if somewhat resentful. "Even if your 7 Passions art was more powerful, you will have little luck in leading me astray from my objectives. Although I do share some sensation with my second nascent soul, your 7 Passions art won't prove to be anything more than a minor hindrance. However, I completely didn't expect that the core founder of the 1000 Bamboo School and the creator of the Great Development Technique, the monarch of soul divergence, had survived until now by possessing a puppet. Were it not for your inconceivably powerful spiritual sense and your complete knowledge of the Great Development Technique, I wouldn't have believed it. But regardless, if you casually stir my emotions over a female cultivator again, don't blame me for being impolite." Han Li's tone turned harsh at the end. The old man snorted and disdainfully said, "Youngster Han, you should know that even with the assistance of the soul-nurturing wood, my soul would last only several tens of years more before it disappears. Were if not for the fact that I had mostly finished my final puppet, I would have gladly passed on and reincarnated. After spending countless years inside a sensationless puppet, I've felt I've lived long enough. And if you hadn't seen a woman for as long as I had, you'd be the same as well." When Han Li heard him, he rubbed his nose and felt his head deeply ache. The true body of the old eccentric was actually hidden in the tube behind his back. Were it not for his agreement to teach Han Li the final 3 layers of the Great Development Technique, and his willingness to impart several powerful puppet designs onto him that had never been published, Han Li would have dealt with him with several methods and exterminated him. But most annoying of all was the old eccentric's unfathomably powerful spiritual sense. Even as he was currently, his soul-searching technique still had no effect on the defenseless eccentric. Rather, the old eccentric was nearly given the opportunity to control Han Li's soul, scaring Han Li away from using such a method again. When faced against the monarch of soul divergence, an eccentric that had lived over 10,000 years, Han Li found himself feeling completely powerless. Han Li paused for a moment and asked, "Old eccentric, when you possessed the puppet body, you didn't think about moving your primal soul out of it. It shouldn't be difficult with your abilities. You think the soul attachment technique is so simple to use. In the past, during my lifetime of great genius, I had divided my attention to too many things. Not only did I create the secret technique to strengthen one's spiritual sense, but I also founded the Thousand Bamboo School and researched the long-extinct puppet methods of the Heavenly South. These matters consumed a majority of my lifespan, not to mention that I had also cultivated during this time. Eventually, I reached late nascent soul stage, and I ran amok in the region without match." "You ran amok in the region and were without match." Han Li wore an odd expression on his face. "What, you think I'm just running my mouth? When my cultivation reached great heights, I had challenged renowned cultivators, but I had always kept a low profile about my successes. As a result, my name didn't spread, and only a few peak cultivators knew of my reputation. Not to mention other lands. The #1 cultivators of the Heavenly South Righteous and Devil Tao at the time had both been beaten into submission by my hand. They were even willing to hand the Far West over to me and relinquish their forces over it. Do you truly believe that the Heavenly South cultivators would stay away otherwise? Even if the Far West was lacking even more resources than it was now and only had enough land for 2 countries, it is still enough to support many sects." The monarch of soul divergence spoke with a prideful tone. "The Far West was something you fought for?" Han Li asked. The old man continued with an even greater air of pride. "Not only that, but I forced the 2 leading figures of the righteous and devil Tao to swear a venomous oath. Within 10,000 years, their disciples and ancestors are not to tread into the Far West. For someone of their stature to be driven as such." The corner of Han Li's mouth curled from disbelief. "If they were unwilling, I would have clearly exterminated their disciples and descendants. Do you believe me to be the soft-hearted sort? If they wished to surround me with numbers, my 1,000 puppets would prove to be a fair fight. However, it is surprising that neither the devil or the righteous Tao haven't invaded the Far West until now. Could it be that they are still obeying their ancestors' orders until now?" The monarch of soul divergence seemed somewhat baffled. And Li grew silent. The old eccentric wasn't simply talking big. Even if he were exaggerating about the past, the 1,000 puppets that the Thousand Bamboo Sect possessed weren't something to take lightly, even if they were only at foundation establishment stage. As for the righteous and devil Tao's oaths to prevent them from conquering the Far West, there was also the matter that the distance to the Far West was too great, the resources too sparse, and the disinterest as well. And Li didn't bother to think too much about it as if it had little relation to him. As he thought about this, he heard the old man sigh. "Just as I finished this and believed I stood at the peak of the cultivation world, I discovered I'd made a fatal error. My lifespan had fallen short, and my cultivation had halted at late nascent soul stage. Although my aptitude and abilities were amazing, I only had a mere 200 years of time left, not nearly enough for me to break through to the deity transformation stage. If I hadn't been distracted with puppet arts from the very start and created my own designs, I believe I would have had a very real chance of entering the deity transformation stage and ascended to the spirit realm. Instead, I was trapped inside of a puppet body for over 10,000 years, leaving me terror-stricken the entire time." The monarch of great divergence spoke with a sullen voice as if he were dejected. When Han Li heard that, he pursed his lips and rolled his eyes. He even felt a tinge of envy. Ordinary cultivators would find it extremely difficult to form a core or condense a nascent soul. As for this old man, he spoke of entering the deity transformation stage as if it weren't a difficult matter in the least. If his words were true, then he was a heaven-defying existence, a cultivation genius that was seen only once in 10,000 years. After seeing that I no longer had any hope to enter deity transformation stage, I was unwilling to helplessly wait for my death to approach. It is said that the soul is immortal and that it reincarnates into another life. But is that still me if I don't have any memories from that lifetime? I would be an entirely different person. In the next world, I may simply be an ordinary commoner lacking spirit roots. The chances of becoming a cultivator are extremely small. With this fear in my heart, I spent my remaining 200 years of life toiling to create a way to extend my life or to retain my memories after reincarnation. As a result, I failed many times only to discover the soul attachment technique by using the Great Development technique as its base. It was a secret technique that hadn't been discovered before. With that said, the old man coldly laughed. Hanli mysteriously smiled and said, "You abandoned a majority of your cultivation only to put your consciousness into a puppet. As a result, you became a living corpse for about 10,000 years. Don't you understand? I didn't have any time and could only complete the soul attachment technique halfway through. Regardless, I used it due to a lack of a better choice, and I ended up as I am today. After attaching myself to this puppet, I didn't think that my cultivation would disappear, and I was only barely able to use my spiritual sense. Manifesting my nascent soul was out of the question. As for the secret room I was located in, it was guarded with fearsome spell formations and over 100 puppet guards. Without a body or magic power, I wouldn't be able to control the puppets even if I managed to break the restrictions. Because I feared retaliation from my enemies, I hadn't told anyone about the secret room, and my disciples were only at core formation stage and were without the ability to find me, leaving me stuck there for 10,000 years. Were if not for my puppet body and the many spirit stones I stored in that secret room, I would have long since perished. Near the end, the old man's voice turned ice cold. Hanli frowned and became pensive, but soon his expression grew lax and he asked, "Old eccentric, why are you so talkative today? When I asked you about the past before, you were always indifferent and lazy, but now you are speaking in such great detail." The old man snorted and angrily said, "Who said that I wasn't going to tell you? Since you've cultivated the Great Development technique, you can be considered some kind of a disciple. Also, if you hadn't found the secret room at the Thousand Bamboo School so quickly, my soul would have soon scattered. After all, the soul attachment technique isn't a true method to extend one's life. Even if the puppet body managed to last 10,000 years, my soul would have burned out since it had lacked the nourishment from a true body for so long. I didn't expect that you would be so clever as to notice that my body was different from the other puppets and would rush to strike me first. You even nearly killed me. I was the one who rushed to strike. Were it not for you launching a sneak attack on me with your rubbish Seven Passions art, I would have left you alone despite sensing there was something different about you. As a result, you formed a codependent bond with my second nascent soul and couldn't further act out of fear of repercussion. It is true that you are able to drive my second nascent soul mad with the Seven Passions art, but likewise, I can have my main nascent soul use the assimilation technique to remove your existence from the second nascent soul. How could I have known that a young eccentric such as yourself was able to condense a second nascent soul? You should know that I could only use my spiritual sense at the time as I wasn't able to use any magic power. Also, I only attacked you out of self-preservation. Feeling that he had done no wrong, the old man instead spoke with a righteous tone. At that moment, Hanli grew silent and no longer wished to continue the conversation. After a moment's pause, the old man said with a self-mocking tone, "All right, let's drop the conversation for now. I didn't expect that you'd have a treasure made of soul-nurturing wood. Else, I would have perished after a year at most even if I had taken a hold of you. This is indeed a silver lining." And Li came to a sudden stop and calmly said, "I only allowed you to use the soul-nurturing wood because you agreed to teach me the last 3 layers of the Great Development technique, not to mention my interest in your puppet designs. After all, you had spent the last 10,000 years sealed inside that secret room researching puppet designs. Since I've cultivated your Great Development technique, I cannot allow those puppet designs to go to waste. This is simply a matter of business between us." The old man roared with laughter from the back of Han Li's mind. "Youngster Han, you're becoming more pleasant to me by the moment. In the past, I also held deception in disdain. Were it not for the fact your aptitude is too poor and you are incapable of cultivating my art, I would have taken you in as a disciple and imparted my knowledge to you." Han Li paused and blinked for a moment before wearing a slight smile. "I actually have many techniques right now, but while my spirit is willing, my talents are lacking. Even if you gave me a cultivation art that was 100 times better than what I have now, I could not divert the attention to cultivate them. However, I am quite interested in your secret techniques." The old man carelessly said, "Secret techniques? You're going to be disappointed. My secret techniques are all tied to my main cultivation art. If you do not cultivate it, you will be incapable of using any of my secret techniques." And Li grew somewhat disappointed, but he changed the topic and said, "Then let's leave the matter be. I'm already very satisfied with being able to cultivate the great development technique and acquire the puppet designs. My trip did not end up being a waste. However, I'm confused about why you didn't impart the true last 3 layers of the technique to your disciples, and instead gave them false but seemingly true incantations." Old man clicked his tongue and said, "My disciples. In the past hundreds of years, not a single one of them were able to cultivate to the nascent soul stage and take on my legacy. If I gave them the true final 3 layers of the great development technique, it would only be inviting disaster upon them. As a matter of fact, while you aren't a disciple of the Thousand Bamboo School, you were able to acquire the first layers of the great development technique. It seems my reasoning actually held true." Han Li's gaze flickered, and he indifferently said, "The great development technique wasn't something that I fought for over in the far west. It was something that was delivered to me." The monarch of soul divergence casually replied, "Relax. The current Thousand Bamboo School is no longer being controlled by the lineage of my personal disciples. Even if you truly robbed it, I wouldn't mind. So long as it doesn't influence our agreement, you may think as you wish." Then with a hesitant expression, Han Li said, "However, I must ask you if you are truly incapable of dissolving the soul seal curse. It's not impossible, but it isn't something that I can do given the limitations of my lifespan. Otherwise, no curse, no matter how wondrous it may be, cannot be seen through by me." The old man replied with a ton of disdain. Although Han Li had anticipated his answer, he still felt his heart weigh down with immense disappointment. With a neutral expression on his face, Han Li replied, "All right, since you are unable to dissolve the curse, I can only make the journey to Devilfall Valley." After an unexpected moment of silence, the old man said, "Youngster Han, entering Devilfall Valley is not a wise decision. I had once planned to enter there when my lifespan was nearing its end, but that changed once I discovered the soul attachment technique. However, I had done my due research. Do you truly believe that you'll be able to safely leave the valley just because 1 or 2 fools manage to occasionally return alive? Not mentioning the ancient restrictions present, but the spatial tiers are unimaginably fearsome. They would occasionally—" The old man's words trailed off and eventually came to a stop. Han Li's heart stirred and he asked, "They would what?" "The spatial tiers would occasionally open pathways to other worlds and release demonic and devilish monsters. If you come across any of them, you had better hope for the best." "Open the way to other worlds? What does that mean?" Han Li asked in alarm. "In addition to the spirit realm, the immoral realm, and the underworld, there are other worlds." The old man calmly explained, "In the past, I had acquired an ancient book. It happened to mention a few matters relating to other worlds. The immortal realm has no connection to our mortal world. The spirit realm and the underworld are both worlds on a higher plane than ours, but they aren't easily passed through. They are filled with vicious demons and ghosts, but it is impossible for them to arrive in our world of their own volition. They are most similar to the elder devils of our world from the age of antiquity. If they have the opportunity to cross over into our world, they will take it with certainty. There are even a few elder devils that are named. If they send even a few doppelgangers into our realm, they will prove incredibly fearsome. As of current, you will not be able to handle them in the slightest." "Elder devils? I've never heard of them before." Han Li spoke with an expression of astonishment. "It's hard to say what they're like. They aren't like us humans or the demon beasts. They also take on a myriad of forms. During times of antiquity, it was said that there was once a path between the realm of elder devils and our world. As a result, these elder devils wreaked havoc in the human world. As a result, the ancient cultivators battled against them for countless years. Eventually, the cultivators were able to kill them one by using numbers to our advantage. However, the injuries and casualties in the war were said to be innumerable, leading to the extinction of many ancient techniques and spirit beasts. It had much to do with the decline of ancient cultivators." The monarch of soul divergence spoke with a solemn tone. "The ancient cultivators warred with these elder devils." Han Li's expression vastly changed. From the miraculous techniques and treasure they left behind, Han Li knew how formidable the ancient cultivators were. From the old eccentric's tone, the ancient devils seemed to be an entire level above the ancient cultivators, much to Han Li's shock. Not only that, but a few devil Dao cultivators who cultivated ancient devil arts later established themselves after discovering the existence of the elder devil realm. They established techniques that were similar to the abilities of elder devils, and even used secret techniques to part the boundaries of the world, so that they could use the devilish chi of the named elder devils, greatly increasing their abilities. While these devil techniques are admittedly powerful, when cultivated to their pinnacle, the user doesn't ascend to the spirit realm. Instead, they are sent to the elder devil realm and become one of their members. Of course, this is only something from legend and hasn't been verified. However, there are many devil cultivators that covet this ferocious power and brave the dangers of cultivating these devil arts. After all, entering the elder devil realm is something that can only occur when one reaches the deity transformation stage. There is no need for most cultivators to even consider it. Of course, the odds of Devilfall Valley spatial tiers opening a path to another world is very small. It is possible you'll make it through just fine, and that this was only a groundless fear. And Lee suddenly recalled the several instances of demonic transformation arts he had seen in the past, as well as a few odd silhouettes. He felt his blood run cold, feeling that the old man's words held true. After solemnly pondering for a long while, Han Li puzzlingly asked, if an elder devil could truly pass through a spatial tier in Devilfall Valley, why wasn't the heavenly south thrown into chaos in the past? The old man coldly laughed and said, what do you mean? The spatial tiers aren't true pathways to another world. Only a few incarnations or lower-grade devils are able to pass through. But because their cultivation isn't great enough, they aren't able to withstand the restrictions of our realm and stay here for too long. But before they return, they will have more than enough time to torture the cultivators entering Devilfall Valley. So it was only restricted to lower-grade devils, and they are only able to stay for a short time. Han Li's stern expression relaxed, and he sighed with relief. It appeared to be the same circumstances as when the Mulan used the ancient lantern to summon their sacred bird. Youngster Han, don't be so happy so soon. Although it is only speculation, the elder devils that truly appear in the valley may be weaker for them to make it through the spatial tiers, but their abilities and techniques are incredibly strange. Even if a human cultivator were to match them in cultivation, they would be certain to die. Han Li tensely frowned and let out a long sigh. He emotionlessly asked, how does Senior know this without entering the valley? Could it be you're just trying to scare me away? While I haven't entered the valley, several good friends of mine had entered. Their luck had failed them as soon as they entered the valley. They had encountered an elder devil, leaving only one of them alive to tell the tale. They were the same as me, vastly powerful cultivators who held little fame. As a result, few in the heavenly south knew of them. That's enough talk out of me today. If you still wish to enter Devilfall Valley, you had best be prepared to fend for yourself. Here is the 5th layer incantation for the Great Development Technique and 2 core formation puppet designs, a portion of the reward that was previously agreed upon. As soon as that was said, a white jade slip flew out from the bamboo tube, and it spun around his head once and then directly fell in Han Li's grasp. I had believed that Senior had forgotten. Although Han Li was still pondering about the elder devils, he revealed an expression of delight upon seeing this. He grabbed the jade slip and quickly sank his spiritual sense into it. I must now nurture my soul. It is fortunate that the Heaven Fortune cask still has my puppet designs. If you have no further business, don't bother me. After lazily speaking these words, the old man's voice came to a sudden stop. After Han Li finished looking through the jade slip, he turned around to look at the bamboo tube he carried on his back with a wavering expression. He knew the old man was still concealing something, but he couldn't do anything about it. As for the Heaven Fortune cask, that was the name of the bamboo tube that Han Li carried on his back. While the bamboo tube was completely unremarkable, it was a true spatial treasure and concealed the puppet body of the monarch of soul divergence. Otherwise, Han Li would have kept it in his storage pouch instead of carrying it on his back. A long while later, Han Li put away the jade slip and glanced around before looking towards the sky. He then shot off the ground in an azure streak and directly flew out of the city. By this time the sky was already dark. Han Li stopped above a forest near the city and descended near a huge tree. There seemed to be something vaguely close to it. It was a giant head that had disheveled hair. If a mortal were to see it, they would immediately flee from fear. But if one were to closely look at it, they would discover that its entire body was buried in the earth. The head had long green-black hair with its face concealed behind the mass of hair. When Han Li approached it, the green giant sensed something and began to stir, opening its ghastly green eyes. When it clearly saw Han Li, the light from its eyes immediately disappeared, and it wore an expression of obedience. Han Li smiled and took several steps towards it before circling around it with interest. Not bad, it's already begun to nurture a simple consciousness. It seems I'll be able to put it to good use in Devil Fall Valley, Han Li muttered to himself with a happy tone. Soon after, Han Li placed down several restrictions in the surrounding area before sitting down cross-legged. He didn't immediately meditate, instead deciding to grab his storage pouch and fiddle with a yellow medallion, engraved with the words Heaven-Peak Sect. As Han Li squinted at it, his eyes glistened in the darkness. After spending the night in the forest, Han Li withdrew the sovereign devil corpse and made his way to the myriad Link Mountains. Before he sought out Violet Spirit and the others the day before, he hadn't discovered traces of the Heaven Peak Sect disciples. As a result, he continued to hold onto the medallion that the Heaven Peak Elder had given him, but hadn't had a chance to use it. It was also out of the question to seek out Marquis Nanlong. It seemed the Heaven Peak Sect had either found another area of residence or that they hadn't even arrived yet. Han Li wasn't worried about this, and instead prepared a temporary place to stay nearby the mountains and refine a few core formation stage puppets in the downtime. With the yin-yang rings in his possession, he reckoned Marquis Nanlong would take the initiative to seek him out. As of current, Han Li faintly realized that the Great North Essence light wasn't something that existed outside of the entrance to the valley. Most of it appeared at the entrance of the valley. Were this not the case, the Ghost Spirit Sect wouldn't have the ability to take several hundreds of cultivators simultaneously into the valley, regardless of how skilled they may be. As these thoughts appeared in Han Li's mind, he flew in a streak of azure light and calmly went forward. With his speed, he was able to fly tens of kilometers away after only a short moment. Less than half a day later, he arrived near the myriad Link Mountains. He had heard that there were several market cities that had recently opened nearby the myriad Link Mountains, and decided to pay a visit to them along the way and collect a few materials for refining puppets. Additionally, Han Li had acquired quite a few rare materials after the war with the Mulan in exchange for their ancient heritage lantern that he had seized during the battle. Those materials were nearly priceless and would allow Han Li to craft an amazing quantity of high-grade puppets. As such, he would only be purchasing a few basic puppet materials while inside the city. As for the materials needed to refine the ancient nascent soul stage puppets, the Thousand Bamboo School in the far west had managed to gather 3 of the materials, but they were still missing a material known as the Blood Phoenix Wood. The material was a rarely seen peak-grade tool refining material. Although it wasn't as nearly difficult to acquire as the auric essence, it was also impossible to find in markets. One would only be able to come across it as a matter of luck. Fortunately, Han Li had already ordered the Drifting Cloud Sect to be on the lookout for the appearance of such a material. If they acquired any information, they were to directly notify him. It would only be a matter of time before he acquired it, but not before he entered Devil Fall Valley. Suddenly, Han Li's expression stirred and he came to a sudden stop. Not far away from him, there was a surge of spiritual chi fluctuations and flickers of light, where a few cultivators were having a fierce battle. Han Li frowned but didn't pay it much heed. As of current, the area was swarming with all sorts of characters, and it wouldn't be rare for enemies to occasionally encounter one another. With Han Li's cultivation, he approached them from a kilometer away. Meanwhile, the cultivators were still fighting, oblivious to his presence. There were 4 men and 1 woman, battling against each other in 2 parties. Han Li swept his gaze past them only to discover that they were all core formation cultivators at the mid and early stages. However, hostilities between the sides were great. Not only were magic treasures soaring through the skies, but various talismans also ruptured around them. However, the party of 3 with the woman were being completely suppressed by the other 2 cultivators. However, it wasn't due to a more profound cultivation. It was because of the several hundred huge moths that they surrounded the opposing 3 cultivators with. These frightening moths were the size of a palm and their wings emitted a poisonous rainbow powder. As a result, the 3 cultivators had to use a majority of their energy toward keeping themselves free from it. And under the additional assault of the 2 cultivators' magic treasures, the 3 found it difficult to endure. While the 3 cultivators found themselves at a disadvantage, the battle was far from over. Apart from the poisonous moths and the silver brush and golden scroll magic treasures that the scholarly man wielded, Han Li found the battle to be little of note given their cultivation. Although he didn't know what sects these cultivators belonged to, Han Li had little interest in being involved with other people's affairs. Just as he thought to fly away, he suddenly spotted an emblem of Yellow Maple Valley from the robes of the scholarly man. Yellow Maple Valley. Han Li glanced at the scholar's face with surprise. As Han Li paused, the battle quickly shifted in favor of the two cultivators controlling the moths. When Han Li decided to approach, the two cultivators hastily spread out their spiritual sense in alarm, and their expressions vastly changed. The pair of cultivators hastily withdrew their magic treasures, but they had their poisonous moths continue to tangle with the three other cultivators. They flew distantly to the side and saluted Han Li. May we know the senior that has graced us with his presence. We are disciples from the Controlling Spirit Sect. The Controlling Spirit Sect, you two are devil cultivators. When Han Li heard this, he ceased flying and vanished the light he was flying in, revealing his true form. You are the Drifting Cloud Sect's senior Han. The taller of the two cultivators immediately recognized him and cried out in alarm. Han Li shot a glance at him and indifferently asked, "You recognize me?" The Controlling Spirit Sect cultivators grew restless, but they maintained a respectful appearance, and one of them replied, "When Senior fought in the border battle, I witnessed Senior Han's vast abilities." "That is good. Although I don't want to interfere with the affairs of juniors, I have some kind of a relationship with Yellow Maple Valley. Put away those spirit insects and abandon the battle for today." Han Li spoke resolutely with a glint shining in his eye. When they heard Han Li, they couldn't help but glance at each other in dismay. "What, do you two fellow Taoists feel that this is difficult to do?" Han Li's expression grew sullen, and his tone turned harsh. The taller of the cultivators felt his heart drop upon seeing Han Li's change in expression, and he inwardly cursed. Since Han Li had decided to involve himself, they had no leeway. He hurriedly replied, "Since it is Senior's orders, we will naturally obey." He meaningfully glanced at the other cultivator, and the two grasped their hands in an incantation gesture. After hastily casting a spell seal to the swarm of moths, they summoned their spirit beast pouches into the air. In an instant, the moths surrounding the three opposing cultivators scattered, and they darted into the storage pouches. The three cultivators had already seen Han Li, but they were unable to clearly hear the conversation the other two had with him due to being assaulted by the moths. But now that they were unfathomably released from the moths, they knew it had something to do with Han Li. In their delight, they exchanged a glance with one another and hastily flew towards him. At that moment, the two Controlling Spirit Sect cultivators felt unwilling to further stay. One of them carefully said, "Would Senior have any other commands for us? We will follow them as best we can." Han Li guessed their intentions and waved his hand. "There is nothing else, you two may leave." "Then we will both take our leave." When the two heard him, they hastily bowed and immediately set off in streaks of green light. At that moment, the other three cultivators flew over. Seeing that the Controlling Spirit Sect cultivators had left, the three glanced at each other in astonishment. Their leader, the middle-aged green-robed scholarly man, stepped forward and saluted Han Li. He wore a respectful expression and said, "Many thanks for Senior's rescue. I cannot thank you enough. May I know Senior's name?" The scholarly man was surprised to see how young Han Li appeared, but he felt as if his appearance was somewhat familiar. Instead of answering, Han Li expressionlessly asked, "You are cultivators from Yellow Maple Valley." "Junior is Yellow Maple Valley's Xianxia. These are my sworn siblings, disciples of the Saber Transformation Doc. Is Senior acquainted with martial ancestor Linghu?" When he saw that Han Li had assisted them despite not belonging to the sixth sex of UA, he realized that this nascent soul Senior should have a relationship with their martial ancestor Linghu. "Xianxia, you're a member of the Chen clan." A strange expression appeared on Han Li's face. The scholarly man revealed a stunned expression. "Senior knows of my clan." Han Li grew silent and began to closely examine the scholarly man, much to the unease of the three-core formation cultivators. Han Li sighed and slowly said, "The Chen clan is one of the three great clans of Yellow Maple Valley. How could I not know of it? What is your relationship with Xianxia?" "Senior recognizes my younger sister," the scholarly man asked in alarm. "Xianxia is your little sister." Although Han Li had guessed this was the case, a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. As for the scholarly man, he was at a complete loss as to what relationship this expert had with his little sister. Han Li's expression wavered for a moment before he slowly asked, "Is she doing well?" With an odd expression, Xianxia replied, "My little sister was unable to form a core and died over 100 years ago from an illness." "She's dead." Han Li couldn't help but mutter this as her lovely appearance suddenly appeared in his mind. He suddenly recalled the last time they had seen on their trip to the mountains, where she bared her feelings to him. He stood in place for a time as if at a complete loss. Seeing that Han Li had remained silent with an odd expression on his face, Chen Kai-Ocean couldn't help but ask, "Senior knows my little sister." Forcefully suppressing the sadness in his heart, he calmly replied, "Of course I know her. When I last saw your little sister, she said she was going to marry, but that was before the invasion of the Devil Dao. I don't know whether or not the marriage went through." After a moment of hesitation, Chen Kai-Ocean said, "My little sister was supposed to marry that year, but the clan she was supposed to marry into switched sides to the Devil Dao. Naturally, we couldn't allow the marriage with Kai-Okian to go through. Afterwards, my little sister became taciturn and showed little interest in men, remaining alone for the rest of her life." And Li suddenly recalled a rumor that had spread throughout the sect, and his expression unconsciously changed. "She didn't marry." An odd expression appeared on Han Li's face, and he wordlessly looked to the sky for a moment. After a long while, Han Li lowered his head and said, "From your expression, it seems you should know who I am, so I won't speak further of myself. The righteous and Devil Dao have currently gathered together here. Since you plan on entering Devil Fall Valley, you had best fend for yourselves." Once Han Li said this, he paid no further attention to the three and tore through the skies in a streak of azure light. The three-core formation cultivators respectfully remained silent, as Han Li quickly disappeared from sight. A while later, the woman couldn't help but ask, "Elder brother, why did that senior help us? Does he have a relationship to your Chen clan?" Glancing in the direction that Han Li disappeared, he bewilderedly said, "Relationship? Our Chen clan isn't worthy of having a relationship with that senior. If I guess correctly, you should also know of his esteemed name. In the past, he originated from my Yellow Maple Valley and escaped unscathed from the hands of a Mulan divine sage. In the battle at the border, he defeated the Mulan sacred bird and executed the Jin Empire's yin-sifting sect elder. Surely you should know of his name." But from what he said, he seemed to be close to my deceased sister. How baffling. The woman was greatly shocked and shouted in alarm, "What? It was that legendary figure. He looks as young as expected. From what my seniors said, this person was once a member of our six sects of UA. It is inconceivable that his abilities are as magnificent as they are now." Chen Kai-Ocean sighed and said, "That's right. When he entered Yellow Maple Valley, I had just reached Foundation establishment. Later, he entered the trial of blood and fire at the same time as me and my little sister. From then on, things spiraled beyond the scope of imagination, and he is now in existence on par with the three great heavenly south cultivators." The third cultivator, the blue-clothed man, curiously asked, "I heard that Marshal Senior Linghu had implored this person to return to the sect, but he was unwilling. Is this true?" After a moment of hesitation, Chen Kai-Ocean vaguely said, "I'm not too sure about this. It is possible, though." Despite their sworn brotherhood, he was unwilling to mention the matter further. Fortunately, the other two cultivators dropped the matter. The blue-clothed man changed the topic and said, "We were quite lucky this time around. Elder brother had just recently refined his golden book and silver brush magic tools and was able to block most of the moth's poisonous powder. Senior Han managed to interrupt the situation, and we were able to escape calamity without harm. If elder brother had fully refined the golden book, surely we would have nothing to fear from the young brothers." The female cultivator eagerly said, "That's true. I have previously heard that the Chen clan had the golden book and silver brush inheritance magic tools, but I didn't think that there was also a refinement method for a magic treasure. Didn't elder brother use a flying sword before?" Chen Kai-Ocean happily explained, "The golden books and silver brushes that our Chen clan disciples use are mere counterfeits of the magic treasure. Although I had wished to refine these magic treasures from the start, I never had the materials as I was only able to gather together the materials to refine a flying sword. Fortunately, I was able to gather enough materials over the past few years to refine these magic treasures. I had hoped to use them in Devil Fall Valley." But soon he paused and continued, "Enough. Regardless of what it is said, it is better for us to be careful, as Senior Han has said. Cultivators that dare to enter Devil Fall Valley are by no means ordinary. It'll be better if we accompany our fellow martial brothers from the six sects of UA." The two nodded. Elder brother's words are reasonable. "Good, we'll do as elder brother has suggested." The three cultivators then took off, leaving any further discussion for later. A distance away, Han Li felt his heart in turmoil. He forcefully suppressed the grief he felt for Chen Kai-Okian and buried it in the deepest depths of his heart before forcing himself to continue on his way. 4 hours later, he he caught sight of the myriad link mountains as well as the thinning miasma that surrounded it. The verdant forests and towering peaks could all be vaguely seen. The mountains on the edge couldn't be said to be huge, only wide. As far as the eye could see, the mountain ridge spread to either side as a continuous black line. Hanli slowed down when he arrived nearby and took a look at his surroundings. It was quiet and had no other traces of cultivators. With an indifferent expression, he flew a bit further and slowly closed his eyes. Suddenly, he spread out his immense spiritual sense and quickly searched a 50 kilometers perimeter around him. A short moment later, he frowned and opened his eyes. Then, with an indifferent expression, he shot through the skies towards a certain destination. After the time it took to finish a cup of tea, he arrived at a small mountain. There was an old cultivator accompanied by a youth who were sitting cross-legged across from each other and were chatting. At that moment, an azure light flashed above their hands to reveal Hanli standing in the air. The two were frightened by his sudden appearance, and they hastily stood up. The old man managed to preserve his calm, but the youth wore a face of alarm. Hanli swept his sights past the two and saw that their cultivations weren't very high. The old man was at the mid-foundation establishment stage, while the youth was only at the 6th layer of chi condensation. It was unknown what they were doing so near the myriad link mountains when their cultivations were so low. At that moment, the old man used his spiritual sense to glance at Hanli only to discover that his cultivation was at an unfathomable realm. With alarm in his heart, he was just about to perform a deep bow as Hanli's cold words echoed through the air. "There is no need to be alarmed. Can you point me in the direction of the nearest market city? That is all you need to do." Hanli's voice was filled with unquestionable authority. When the old man heard this, he quickly replied in a respectful manner, "Head west about 200 kilometers. There is a newly opened market city that Senior may take a look at." "Head west 200 kilometers, I got it." Then with a flash of azure light, Hanli disappeared without a trace. The old man watched with amazement as the azure streak disappeared and turned into a speck of light across the sky and disappeared. The old man and the youth remained dumbstruck by the sight. About 200 kilometers west, there was an extremely crude temporary market city that had been created with stone formation techniques. There were very few cultivators wandering within. Hanli didn't pay this any mind and purchased a large number of materials from the stores before flying off towards the mountain range. He walked over 5 kilometers deep into the mountain range as the miasma suddenly grew thicker. Soon, he arrived on top of a small, unremarkable mountain. It was easy work for Hanli to open a new cave residence. With over 10 flying swords cutting about, a small and simple residence was carved out of the mountain after only a short moment. After looking at the results, Hanli nodded with satisfaction and promptly placed 2 simple spell formations around it before entering the cave residence. He first released Silvermoon and had her cultivate within the cave. He then released the sovereign devil corpse and buried it in a dark room. Afterward, Hanli brought a large number of materials with him in a hidden room. He sat at the center of the hidden room and took out the jade slip that the monarch of soul divergence had given him before looking through the 2 core formation puppet refinement methods that it contained. These 2 types of puppets were the same size as the Foundation Establishment Grade 8 puppets that he had previously created, and they each had their own merits and drawbacks. One of the puppets had the shape of a huge tortoise with a dense and rough exterior that could withstand over 3 blows from a nascent soul stage cultivator. Additionally, it attacked by spitting out balls of lightning flame, an attack on the level of a mid-core formation cultivator. However, its sole flaw was that it was incredibly slow and clumsy. If a cultivator were to attack it from close range, it would become an immobile target that wouldn't be able to defend itself. The other puppet design was that of a tiger, and the tortoise's exact opposite. This puppet didn't have any long-range attacks, and its only defense was its swift and light movements. It had crystal claws that were 6 inches long and capable of easily shredding through the protective barriers of a common core formation cultivator. It was completely dedicated to close-quarters combat. After looking through the puppet's characteristics, Hanli decided to refine a few puppets from both designs. As such, he would be able to better deal with any situations that Devil Fall Valley may place him in. With that decided, Hanli immersed his spiritual sense into the jade slip and committed the refinement methods to memory. Afterwards, Hanli spent 3 entire days inside the hidden room while he sat cross-legged and didn't move. But on the 4th day, Hanli's expression stirred and he pursed his lips before withdrawing his spiritual sense from the jade slip. He then pondered for a moment more, and with a flip of his hand, the jade slip disappeared in a flash of white light. He flung out the storage pouch at his waist, and countless tool refinement materials appeared on the floor with a flicker of white light. Rare woods, metal essences, various colored gems, and jade boxes of all sizes. A short moment later, these items were all gathered together in a large pile in front of Han Li before he recalled the storage pouch back to his waist. Afterwards, he swept his gaze past the materials in the pile. His eyes dropped onto the jet black ironwood, and with a deep breath he pointed at it, summoning it towards him.